We are in the off season, so it is officially time. Our quarterback rankings for 2025. I'm back with my boy Mathis. We have done this 2 years in a row. This is going to be the third year of our annual quarterback rankings. That's what you do basically in the off season. Football's done. We got nothing else to do. Let's go ahead and rank quarterbacks. Now, the good thing about this is since we did it last year, we can compare it to our rankings that we had the year prior, and we obviously got a lot of rookies coming in, but I think also just a lot of young players that are really hard to project. The Bryce Youngs, the J.J. McCarthy's, the Caleb Williams, Drake Mays, Penix, all those guys. Really hard to find a spot for them, and I think some guys that maybe are also proven, some rising, some falling. Going to talk about it all, basically. Thank you to Mathis for joining me again this year. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Yeah, you're right. In the off season, you got to find ways to kind of get you through, and this is a good exercise to just see year-to-year basis how quarterbacks are improving, getting worse, things like that. So I'm excited for year number 3 here.
All right, well, let's not waste any more time. Basically, all we're talking about is quarterbacks today. So let's just go ahead and dive in how it's going to work. We have ranked the top 40, in our opinion, quarterbacks, not just starters. They don't have to be starters, just straight up quarterbacks in the NFL. And we also have a few honorable mentions that did not make the list, and we'll just go through. Mathis has actually not seen mine rankings, and I don't know, mine might be a little more out there than the general consensus public. I definitely did a lot of potential deep dives, but also a lot of context got to be used for some of these guys with their situation and everything, and some of them you kind of know my opinion on in terms of maybe I'm a little more out there with their quarterback play, but we'll get to that later. Honorable mentions that did not make either of our lists, but we were kind of considering. We got the Joe Miltons of the world. Malik Willis, young guys, just didn't make the list. Mason Rudolph, maybe he'll be a starting quarterback. Hopefully not, though, for the Steelers' sake. Josh Dobbs went on that great run, but last year didn't play. And, I mean, he definitely had, even when he had that run last year, there were definitely some down games in there, but did not make the list. Mac Jones, pretty baseline. Jacoby Brissett, I was pretty higher on him last year, but when he started with the Patriots, didn't really show as much. Ryan Tannehill, yeah, he still exists, and I think he technically, if he was on a team and maybe played, maybe he could make the list, but we just can't put him on now. Aiden O'Connell just didn't make it, and then Kenny Pickett also did not make the list for any of ours. And if there's other guys I didn't list, they weren't even worthy of being on honorable mention. So sorry, no disrespect, but let's go ahead and dive into 40 through 33. So we'll do kind of it in spurts here. So we'll start off with the guys that don't make the top 32, but they're in our list because we feel they're, definitely a lot of good backups to talk about, at least in the NFL. So for our rankings, you can see up on the screen here, I'll have everything up and showing you on a graphic. Each of ours, number 40 through, let's do 37 to start. For Mathis, he has Andy Dalton at 40, Marcus Mariota at 39, Jake Browning at 38. Remember him from last year, didn't play at all this year. And then Tyrod Taylor at 37. All of these guys were in the honorable mentions list for him last year. For me, I have at 40 Deshaun Watson, who did not, I'll spoil it already, did not make Mathis's list and was very low on my list last year. In fact, I can't even remember where I had him. I think it was maybe around the low 30s, so he probably dropped around 8 or so. But 39, I actually have Jackson Dart. So for me, he just barely makes the list. Tyler Shuck, I have at 38, going to be a starting quarterback for the Saints. Jameis Winston, I have at 37. Which one of those for you, Mathis, regards to both the one on your list maybe you could quietly touch on, or what's one in my list that kind of sticks out to you between Watson, Dart, Shuck, and Winston from 40 to 37?
Yeah, I didn't really see a need to put Watson on. Honestly, I didn't even think of him. I honestly just kind of forgot about Watson. I think there's a chance he probably have played his last NFL snap. I think that's definitely a realm of possibility. So I even think when he was playing for the Browns last year, probably was the worst player that got snaps. I mean, he had to have been like a bottom five player like in the entire league last year for the Browns. And he was that bad. But I didn't have Jameis Winston either. I thought about having him on, but I think he's even kind of dipped down his play a little bit from being a backup. I mean, stepped in for Watson once he got hurt again, and then he didn't really play that well. He got benched again for DTR and I think what Bailey Zappi. So I don't think Jameis is even. I don't think he should even be a backup quarterback anymore. I think he's more like a number three. And I think that's going to be his role probably for the Giants for whatever team he kind of latches onto this year. I think he's more at this point kind of a locker room like just fun kind of get along kind of guy, and not really somebody you want to put actually into the game. So I didn't have either of those guys on my list, and Tyler Shuck and Jackson Dart, they're both on mine, but I just had them a little bit higher because I just think right away with their upside and just being younger than some of the veterans that I think they could maybe just be better from day one. But obviously, a lot of variance there.
Yeah, so for Shuck and Dart, I mean, I think Dart, I was lower on just him right now, anyways. I don't think he was technically a first round caliber quarterback just based on his talent alone. So that's what I'm going based off now. But I'm not taking into account that I do like his situation with his coaching and that he can sit and wait. And I think the Giants situation in a year, it could look a lot better than maybe some people think with the offensive line situation. Like they have Andrew Thomas, they have Malik Neighbors, they have some good pieces there. But I just don't think we're going to see him much anyways. And even then, I still think he's not, just as ready right now. And then Tyler Shuck, he's definitely in the top 40 for me, but I'm just kind of more worried about his situation. I really didn't love it. Like it made sense, but he was a guy that was just super good when the pocket was clean. Like he was actually very underrated. And I think it honestly, to me, like I understood why the Saints took him over Shedeur Sanders, but for me, you could talk me into that. But his worst trait is under pressure. Like he is terrible under pressure. That was his biggest issue because he got hurt for 4 years in a row in college. That's why he was older. And the Saints offensive line, I mean, is it going to be one of the worst in the NFL? I think so, and so that just kind of worries me, but I still don't want to fully disrespect him. And then, Watson, Winston. I mean, when I really dove into it, their situation was pretty terrible. I mean, I think Watson had some of the most drops, and he objectively is not been great. But I still threw him in there because there were, the more I looked, slight flashes of stuff, but just very, very slight. It's just I agree. I wouldn't be surprised if he played his last snap in the NFL. And then Winston, gunslinger, he wasn't terrible, but he was better than Watson on the Browns. So, we'll see. That says something there. But all those guys, pretty irrelevant for our rankings. Now let's go to 36 through 33. For me, I have Andy Dalton at 36, who you had at 40. I have Joe Flacco at 35. I have Anthony Richardson at 34 and Daniel Jones at 33. Now, you have Jimmy Garoppolo. Anthony Richardson is also in this kind of tier here. And then Jackson Dart and Tyler Shuck, pretty similar. You just have them, like you said, a little bit higher. And then you have Daniel Jones just a tiny bit higher as well. And is Joe Flacco on your list? I'm not sure I'm seeing
No, I don't
Mr.
have Flacco. No, I don't have him on my
Okay, so
list.
Flacco's not even on your list.
Nope.
Well, let's touch on Anthony Richardson. He went down 13 spots from your list last year and 10 spots from mine. I have him one spot ahead. And I don't know, maybe we are disrespecting him, but to be honest, I think putting him in the top 40 is us showing signs of actual growth. I think that's genuinely true, because it's possible that this progression doesn't even happen. He had both the worst. I'll bring up these stats. I'll kind of explain them. There's just simple stats that I looked up, or they're advanced, but they're, easy to follow. It's basically just good throw percentage of really good throws, and bad throw percentage of throws that are pretty terrible. He was the worst in both of those. The lowest good throw percentage of starting or caliber quarterbacks in terms of guys that played enough snaps, and the most bad throws. He was horrendous under pressure, which for a guy running, like you would hope he'd be a little bit better there. Nope, was terrible. Wasn't really as efficient of a runner as you would have hoped for a guy that was his whole point of being drafted. He fumbled one time on every 10 attempts. So every 10 times he rushed, there was at least one guaranteed fumble. his completion percentage and adjusted completion percentage, which adjusted completion percentage takes into account drops, were by far the worst. And he was like 7% behind second worst, which was Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who was also terrible. But I mean, he still looks like a good runner. It's just the stats didn't really back that up, and obviously injuries have kind of hurt him. He didn't really. He did show a lot of like big time playability. I mean, sometimes you turn on red zone and you see what, I don't know, an Alec. What's his name? For the Colts,
Alec
the
Pierce.
receiver. Alec Pierce, like 90-yard touchdown bomb or something like that, So he showed some flashes. It's just, it was really not put together at all. But that's the hope. That's what they're hoping for. Josh Allen's first 2 years were not great, but they were much better than these first 2 years, to be honest, for Anthony Richardson. And so I don't even think it's really a guarantee. But, you've had the flashes. It's year 3. We'll see what happens. I know there's been effort and stamina concerns. Maybe you know a little bit more about that. I just kind of remember that coming up. So whatever that was is definitely playing into account. But yeah, definitely I think a disappointing season for sure for what we expected him to increase. And we had him in the high 20s last year.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to with the effort and the stamina thing was, I think it was against the Houston Texans. I think maybe middle of the season, relatively maybe early. I can't exactly remember the week, but he basically had a couple of plays where he was running around and then he tapped his helmet, asking to get a breather basically on the sideline, and just that's kind of just a bad look if you're a quarterback,
Yeah.
because quarterbacks, you don't leave the game unless you're severely injured. And that's when they had some locker room issues. Then after that, he got benched for Flacco, and then Flacco was just terrible, so they put him back in. But yeah, I don't think Richardson belongs anywhere close to where we had him last year, and I didn't even have him as a top 32 quarterback. I just think he's one of the worst starters in the league last year. I don't really think he's going to start. If I had to predict who's going to start majority of the games for the Colts next season, I'm picking Daniel Jones over Richardson. So I just think everything you said, and then the injury concern as well. What can we really get from this guy? It's really not a lot at this point. So yeah, that's why I have him pretty low.
Yeah, I also have Daniel Jones ranked ahead of him. Other guys, I don't think you have, or you had a little bit lower. Andy Dalton. I got to keep him in. Got to keep him in the list. He showed some good stuff. When I kind of went on my rant about Bryce Young and why he needed to be benched, Andy Dalton came in the next game against the Raiders and had 3 touchdowns. He slowed down a lot though after that, which is why Bryce Young even got the chance to come in.
That's why I dropped on a little bit, because
a lot, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But he was not even on your list last year, so technically he improved from honorable
Okay.
mention. But I had him exactly at 36 last year, so I think he's definitely still in that good backup range.
Yeah.
But since he's been gone from Cincinnati, he's had stretches of pretty solid play. Obviously some stinkers in there, but been around town, Dallas, New Orleans. I think he stays around this range. And then Joe Flacco, I had 35. You did not have on your list. I mean, he's going to start over Sanders right now. I think Sanders is going to be ahead of him by the end of the season. But he's a capable starter. I mean, he's kind of shown that, been with the Browns. And then I wanted Jameis on my list just because of the gunslinger he was. And, there's some upside there. But he was better than Jameis when they played on the same team. So have to be ahead of him as well. And then my last guy here was Daniel Jones. You actually have him a little bit higher. You have him at 31. I don't think he's as bad as people think when they just think of the name Daniel Jones. I mean, he's had really crap offensive line situations, and his advanced throwing stats were actually really good last year. They weren't that far off from Tua and Baker. Only Anthony Richardson had a higher drop percentage, so that was something maybe I should have mentioned more in the Anthony Richardson conversation. Now, it's probably a high percentage because Anthony Richardson didn't play as many snaps, and Daniel Jones didn't play as many snaps, but if I were to tell you Daniel Jones had the highest drop percentage, I don't think many people would be surprised anyways. But I think today he's a better QB option than Richardson, and I mean, both of us are even saying maybe in the future that might be the case. We'll see how AR does in his progression. But let's go ahead and get into the top 32. We will go and start off with numbers 32 through, let's do 28. So we'll do them in spurts of 5 here. For number 32, for both of us, we both have Shedeur Sanders sneaking into the top 32. That was probably definitely a plant by each of us to get him in there at least. You have Daniel Jones, like we said, at 31. Kirk Cousins is 30. You have Cam Ward, rookie quarterback, at 29. And J.J. McCarthy, basically a rookie quarterback, but was drafted last year, didn't play, at 28. I have Justin Fields at 30 and Tyrod Taylor at 31. So I do still have Tyrod, my boy, up higher. Kirk Cousins, you had 30. I have 29. And then I actually have Michael Penix at 28. Definitely lower than what you'll see with what you have. Not by a crazy amount, but by a little bit. For the guys on here, I think let's go ahead and touch on Shedeur Sanders. We have him at the same exact rank. I think pretty obvious that we both wanted him there. I think I could just ask you. You definitely just we wanted to get him at least in the top 32 to be a starting caliber quarterback. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much fair. I mean, I don't really have any of the other young kind of rookie quarterbacks that far ahead of them, but obviously, I think just with where they were picked and the perceived notion of their talent and stuff, I wanted to give them the edge. But I just think even I mean the initial reports of Shador and Durham Brown's I guess OTA's minicamp, it's been pretty good. It looks like he's just been a pretty good player, and that's not really far from what I had my expectations for him set when he was picked or during the draft process. That was always kind of what I envisioned. I think he could be, a middle tier quarterback. Like I could see him being the 14th, 15th best quarterback in the league. So I think it's fair to have him at number 32.
We have him at the same rank, but you were definitely a little higher on him than I was. So I guess we'll see when he plays, kind of where each of us have him after that. 31, we already spoke on Daniel Jones. I had Tyrod Taylor. This is a quarterback rankings. It's not based off relevancy. I'm still not forgetting how good he was when he got chances to play. Advanced Stats loved him. Even when you watched him, he just looked like definitely a professional quarterback. So I think he 100% should be on this list. You had him at 37. I had him at 31. Definitely much higher, but I always had him a little bit high. Number 30 for you is Kirk Cousins, and he's 29 for me. Justin Fields is 30, but we'll get to Justin Fields when you have him ranked. So Kirk Cousins, he was at 15 for both of us last year, the same exact ranking, and we don't go over these beforehand, so we just kind of stumble upon them when like blindly when we get ready to record. And Kirk Cousins was the same for us last year, and we have him almost the same this year. And yeah, I mean, it was clearly a disappointing season for Kirk Cousins. I don't think it was as horrible as people think it was. And I think, obviously, I think if Penix wasn't drafted by them last year, I think they would still go with Kirk Cousins for another year. And be like, hey, like he was here for 1 year. We can get him acclimated to the offense. Like he can be much better. We have a new OC, like, all that good stuff. But, that's not the case. And Kirk is here. And I think, definitely trying to seek some kind of starting quarterback job. If Rodgers has some kind of things where he doesn't play or doesn't want to go to the Steelers, Kirk Cousins, I think, is very viable for the Steelers, and he technically, at least in our opinions, and I agree, is a top 32, meaning is a top, starting caliber quarterback. He was around the high to mid 20s in basically all the grades last year. Had some high highs, I think. I mean, there were some definitely crazy games, like that Bucks game, that went to overtime, a ton of touchdowns. But definitely some low lows with fumbles probably being the biggest thing for him. He had the second most fumbles in the NFL, which is just why he's so low for the rankings this year. But still a starting caliber quarterback in my opinion.
Yeah, I just think the biggest concern with him was down the stretch. It just seemed like his arm and even his movement just really faded. So I guess the big question there is, did it have to do with him coming back from an injury and his body just kind of wearing down sooner than it should, or is
Maybe,
that kind of
yeah.
his old age just kind of catching up to him? Maybe it's a little bit of both. But I still think I would take him over all the guys we said if I had to start a game tomorrow or play for a season. But I'll be interested to see where he ends up because I don't think he's going to be on the Falcons the whole season. I think once a team has a quarterback injury, that's probably where he's going to go. They're just kind of waiting to see which team or quarterback that will be. But I still think he can be a serviceable quarterback. But I do think with his Achilles injury now, his movement and being kind of under pressure a little bit, it's even worse than it initially was.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see. We'll see kind of where he ends up there. Let's go ahead. We'll touch on. I'll just touch on the quarterback for whoever has him higher, unless there's a giant disparity that I really want to talk about that I have much lower, which you'll see soon. But let's go ahead and jump to 27 through 23, which you'll see up on the screen here. At 27, I have Cameron Ward. 26, I have Russell Wilson. For 27 for you, you have Russell Wilson as well, so pretty much the same. And at 26, you have Justin Fields. So 25, I have J.J. McCarthy. You have him at 28, as we had mentioned. And then 25 for you is Bryce Young. 24 for me is Sam Darnold. 24 for you is Michael Penix. And then 23 for me, I would like you can't see the rankings. I'd like you to guess who my 23rd quarterback is. Yours is Caleb Williams, as you can see on the screen. I'd like you to guess who 23 is for me.
Brock Purdy.
Yes. I have Brock Purdy at 23. We'll get to him a little bit later. But let's start off down here, which, yeah, I know the comments are going to kill me for that one because they did last year. But I have my reasons. Don't worry. Let's start off. Let's see. We went from 27. Russell Wilson, I don't think there's much to talk about. He actually didn't move in my rankings. He was at 26 last year. He dropped 3 for you. I honestly, though, I realistically, I could rank him higher. I could, because the way he played, it was not bad. Like, he could have been in the maybe higher 20s, to be honest, the way he played. But just with ranking, I mean, that last season alone, again, could be maybe 20, but with ranking like the younger guys, I think some of them just objectively, we have to project them being better than what they were last year. And I think it just kind of jumps what Russell Wilson is now, but I do think he's 100% the Giants' best, quarterback in that situation. I would put him a little higher. I just think the Giants situation is a bit worse than the Steelers last year. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it's not as good as maybe we would hope for him, at least compared to what the Steelers were. He had the same big-time throw percentage and turnover-worthy play percentage as Lamar Jackson. Yeah, so as a thrower, he was pretty good. He didn't have as many of those plays, but on a percentage-based on a percentage basis, like, he kind of showed some solid stuff. And I think both of us agree he was, at least in that moment. Maybe you don't, because you actually have Fields higher, but I thought he was definitely better than Justin Fields when they played. And then he was 26. Do you have anything on Russell Wilson? You have him 27. And then you can just jump right into Justin Fields, so you have at 26, and I have a little bit lower at 30.
I think this is a good range for Wilson. I think at this point, I think only thing you really get with Russ is kind of the lollipop deep balls, and I think his numbers may be a little bit skewed because of the George Pickens and the stretch of kind of having even Mike Williams for part of the season. So we kind of had some good receivers to help out. I would say his I guess his only good asset that he brings. But I think in terms of actually down and down basis, I mean, we saw the Steelers offense just especially towards the end of the season after they kind of had like a hot stretch in the middle of the year. Once they kind of figured out, okay, we just prevent the deep ball from Russell, we make him just try to complete passes down the field. He can't do that effectively, and we really saw the Steelers offense struggle. And I think they lost probably like 5 out of the last 6 games. I mean, it was something crazy where they really
Yeah,
fell off
something.
because I mean they were competing to be the number one team in the AFC North, and then they just bottomed out. And I think a big part of that was the play of Russell Wilson just falling off. So I still think he's a starter and a bridge starter, which is why the Giants kind of signed him. I think he could do some good stuff, maybe throwing some deep balls to Malik Neighbors, but I just think his down and down stuff and him actually for a whole season starting, I think he's probably going to be one of the worst starters in the league. And then Justin Fields, I'm just a little bit higher on. I just think the way I view it is Russell's descending and Fields, I can still see him getting a little bit better. And I think with the rushing ability of Fields, I'm taking that over anything that Russ provides. So I think the deep ball, okay, it can provide you some big plays. I think Fields, if you can get him in an offense where I think the Jets, pretty decent situation. The offensive line is vastly improved. You've got Brees Hall, you've got Garrett Wilson. I think Fields could have a sneaky, pretty solid year. I'm not talking about like breaking out and getting like a huge contract, but I think he could be a real quarterback and just keep the Jets competitive. Whereas if I put Russell Wilson on the Jets, I don't know if I can still see that same type of upside. So I'm just going to take Fields slightly over him just because of the rushing ability and then kind of just his physical talent and the Jet situation.
Yeah, the Steelers' last 4 games were Bengals, Chiefs, Ravens, Eagles. So definitely a tough road there. But no, I mean I'm not dying on the hill of Justin Fields. Like I have him 30, you have him 26. Even in my notes, I say you could put him in that 26 area.
Yeah.
Maybe he's I don't know. Maybe he's the next big boom like Baker, Geno, Sam Darnold. Maybe I mean it's possible. I
Yeah.
personally don't think on it. I'm not betting that, but it's could be that. I just think if you just watch the Steelers last year, like I think a lot of people obviously love Justin Fields because they really liked him in college, and when they thought he was going to be super good in the NFL, and then when he wasn't as good as they thought, which we don't have it documented, but Mathis and I would have text message threads being like, yeah, Justin Fields is not as good as people think, at least right out of college. That they want him to be good because they thought he would be good. That's kind of what my thing is, where I think the general consensus is with Fields. And last year, like the stats looked pretty good in the games he played, but there's a reason Russ started the end of the season, because if you just watched, like they were so limited what they could do, and he is just not a top 32 passer. He's just really not. He's been much better, like than he was his rookie second, third year, definitely. And again, maybe this is the flourish spot, but I just did not see enough in his second destination where he got starting time to be able to put him higher. And Russell Wilson was definitely better, in my opinion, especially if you watched stats back it up to, like, he was just definitely better than Justin Fields. So right now, and maybe I just don't see as much of an improvement, but maybe I'm wrong. And I think the situation's not that dissimilar to the Steelers. Like the offensive line, like is definitely improving, but the Steelers' offensive line is getting better too. They didn't have rookie Troy Fautanu out of Washington at all last year. Both have rookies that are improving. I think the Jets is probably better, but they both have one kind of main star receiver, Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf. So I don't know. Jets added tight end, maybe the Mason or Mason Smith, or who's the guy that? Yeah, I
Mason
think that's
Taylor.
from or Mason Taylor, yeah, from LSU. Maybe he had some first round buzz, so maybe he's pretty relevant in the offense immediately. I do just kind of have a little question marks about their OC and play calling for the Jets right now. It's not as proven, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I have them a little bit lower. And then this was up to 23. So I mean, Cam Ward we can touch on. I'm 27. You have him 29. I just pure projection, literally. I think this is a pretty good spot for like his rookie year. Gonna be a big play guy. Gonna be some turnovers. I think you'll see him really rip it his rookie year. I think the Titans have a better situation than some people think. They spent a lot on the offensive line, got a lot of weapons in the draft. Again, could be lower just based on how he's actually going to play, but I think this 27 to 29 range is pretty good for him. Do you have any outstanding thoughts on Cam Ward?
No, I think that's right. It's just really hard to. You just don't know really at all how these rookies are gonna start right away and how they're gonna perform. I think Cam Ward, you're right. You're gonna get the big playability, but you also get some of the turnovers. The biggest thing that I wanted to see with Ward and why I didn't have him is like a great prospect or even one of the best ones if you compare it to last year's draft is just kind of the down and down stuff, learning how to play quarterback. And because in college you can get away with playing off script and running around and playing backyard football a ton. You can't do that in the NFL. I mean, we see it time and time again. Even Caleb Williams kind of struggled with that last year. We'll talk about him soon, but I think we could see similar struggles of Cam Ward, but just not as I think even Caleb his turnovers were kind of down. I think we could see more of those for Cam Ward, so that's why I kind of have him lower than what I had Caleb last year.
Yeah, and it's funny. We have him higher than we had some other rookies last year that ended up doing insanely well, which I think is pretty obvious, and we'll get to later. But next guy on the list I want to talk about, JJ McCarthy, also kind of one of the hardest guys to rank. Not a ton on him because it's again purely projection. I have him 3 spots higher. I have him at 25. You have him at 28. Not that different, but I think this is definitely one of the hardest guys to rank because it's just going based off pure projection. But I really don't know if I'm slightly on the higher or lower end. I have no clue of JJ McCarthy. Like I thought it was gonna be a little lower, but I kind of moved him up a bit. I don't know. I think the more I look at it, the more I just feel really good about his situation. To be honest, it's just it has to be combined with coming out as a prospect. He was way more raw than I think it maybe some people thought, and he didn't get a rookie season at all. So this is kind of basically his rookie season. Maybe it's not going to be as full of a rookie year because he was there last year, so maybe he only needs to get through half a season, and that's his quote unquote rookie kind of bump that he needs to get over. But I don't know. I think like is he going to come in and be as good as Sam Darnold was? I don't think so, but maybe. I mean, Sam Darnold obviously had all his issues, and then he showed flashes, came over, and it all worked out. So maybe. I have him lower, and I believe you have him lower as well. Yeah, you definitely have him lower. You have him much lower. I have them 1 spot apart. So maybe I'm just lower on Sam Darnold. And a little bit higher on JJ, but I think I could see it going a few different directions. I just think I look at it and I'm like, I could see it going more good than bad. Like if it's a Bo Nix situation, I mean, this team literally won 14 games last year, and again, we don't really know how good JJ is, but if he's just kind of baseline whatever, put it in this offense, like they're gonna be pretty good. I mean, playoffs is definitely in the consideration. I don't think they're a 14-win team again, but I just don't think it's that crazy to think he's around here. But we have him pretty, similar there. And then we'll get to Sam Darnold because you have him higher than I do. But any thoughts on JJ?
Yeah, this range makes sense. I think the situation probably, I mean, you could argue the best in the league for a young quarterback to go to with the play calling and head coach as well. I just think it's so hard when you have no, like, the only thing we have is a few preseason throws from him, and he's coming off of a knee
And
injury.
even
So
in
he,
college, it was like the lowest
and
attempts,
I think that's another
at
thing
Michigan.
too is the Vikings don't play like a run heavy offense. They want to throw the football, and JJ really hasn't been a part of an offense like that before. Michigan was run first, and then he was running some play action off of that, probably throwing 15 to 20 times a game. Kevin O'Connell wants to throw it, 28, 30 times a game. So I wonder how that's going to be as well. Like, is he ready to kind of take that mantle? Because he really hasn't had to do that in what 5 years. And I don't even know if he did in high school. I'm assuming he did, but I mean, you know what I mean. He hasn't really had that play style for a full season in a long time. So that's another thing that's going to be an interesting point. How does that kind of adjustment period work out?
Yeah, we'll see how that kind of goes. Sam Darnold, you have him higher. We can go over. Let's see. Let's touch on Michael Penix. You have him at 24, and I had him on the last kind of note at 28. So kind of flip flop. I have JJ maybe 3 or 4 spots higher than you. You have Penix 3 or 4 spots higher than me. What's your take on Michael Penix for next year?
I think he played what 3 or 4 games down the stretch. I was pretty impressed actually, just with some of the throws he was making. I mean, I think he had a lot of tight window. I mean, like wow, like he actually fit the ball in type of throws. I mean, his arm talent, he showcased a decent amount of it. I think the accuracy is something that's going to have to be fixed and touched on. That's kind of the thing with him is can he get that a little bit more consistent? Because if he can, I'm pretty bullish on Penix being a really good quarterback. But I mean, obviously that's always a huge question mark if a player can improve their accuracy a decent amount or not. But I just thought for the small sample size we had of him, the Falcons' offense was a lot more explosive with him than Kirk Cousins. I think their even production was a lot better. They were a lot more competitive even down the stretch. I mean, they lost a lot of games with Cousins, and I mean that's why Penix took over. And then I remember that game vividly against Washington on the road. I mean, it was back and forth, him and Daniels in prime time. And even the last game of the season against the Panthers, when you guys had a shootout, I mean, what did they score? 30, 31 or 34 points in that game?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
mean,
36 or something,
I know the
and
Panthers
lost.
defense isn't great, but I mean, I still thought he made a lot of really nice throws in that game, and he definitely elevated the Falcons' offense. So I just think when you take a look at just his small sample size, projecting it towards next year, I was pretty impressed with that because that's the first and only real reps or footage that we have of Penix. So I was pretty intrigued with it, honestly, and I was a decent fan of Penix coming out of Washington as well. So I think he could have a really good season for the Falcons this year. They got a pretty good situation. So yeah, I'm just kind of buying in some Penix stock.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. 24. He's up 4 spots from last year's projection for you. He's up 7 for me, but I still have him much lower. Or not much, but 4 spots. So I'm a Panthers fan. Mathis is a Dolphins fan, so we'll get to Tua later. But I actually did kind of really tune in because I wanted to really see, hey, is he's gonna be in the division? Like, I personally had him like sixth out of the top 6 guys in the quarterback class last year. So I was not as high. I still thought he was late first round caliber, but obviously the crazy shock that happened, with that draft, we all know. And so maybe 28 is seen as a little low because people mention the stuff that you brought up. But it's hard because there's only 3 games, but he graded out like super weird. Like PFF loved him. They absolutely loved him. But it was 3 games at the end of the year, and the highest ranked defense he played was the Giants without Dexter Lawrence. And then the other 2 were literally the 31st and 32nd ranked defense in the Commanders and the shitty Panthers. And trust me, I can tell you it was the shitty Panthers. Very, 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 very shitty. They were terrible. Like I said, coming out, I had him a little bit lower. I mean, he had a great deep ball, good arm. The situation he had was pretty great, and he was much older coming out. But again, PFF would make you think this guy should be ranked like top 10 going into next year, like based on what happened. But I think that's why we really need full context when we do these deep dives. The only player that rivals his completion percentage was Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Spencer Rattler, and Anthony Richardson. These are the guys that he's in. So the accuracy that you mentioned, it is a massive deal. Like, it is a gigantic deal of just making actual throws on second and first down to get to a good position on third down. And yeah, he can maybe get you that really nice, third and 14, but you're not trying to be in third and 14 every other freaking drive. And that's not going to happen with Michael Penix, where he can get you that third and whatever on every single drive. And it seemed like that was happening a lot. The only player with a lower accuracy percentage in terms of just how good the throws are / how bad they are was the guy we brought up, Anthony Richardson. He was the only one worse. Now, again, it's 3 games, small sample size, but even when you watched, he had I can't remember if it was Commanders or Giants, but one of them, it was just a terrible game. And then you have the Panthers that everyone looks at, which was a great game. But the Panthers defense was horrendous. Like, they were last for a reason. They were not even close to, like, you could say, 30th or 30 or 29th versus 32nd. Like, that's kind of close. No, the Panthers are not even close to that. Like, that's how bad they were. And obviously it was a shootout. So definitely have that kind of there. But that's definitely, I think I'll bring that up as an example that I definitely want to use, because you have a ranking that's kind of interesting to me with your 24 and 25. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, that's kind of why I have a Penix lower. I think his situation is really good. For general starting quarterbacks, the OC is new, so we'll see kind of what he does. The situation's pretty good. You got really good stuff around you. So maybe this is too low, but I think he was worse than people think. But improvement, 24, 28, not that big of a difference. Now let's go ahead and get into, we'll do Sam Darnold later because you have him a little bit higher. I'm going to get into Brock Purdy. So I had him at 19 last year, and I got crucified by the few people that even watched these shorts I did or YouTube stuff. And I have him even lower now. And I think, this is the inevitable spot of Brock Purdy that, again, I hated to do, but I just think if I'm taking the pure quarterback, I genuinely think this is around where he is. And to be honest, I did a small victory lap last year because I think it proved to itself at least a little bit in what happened last year. Last year, like I said, this is the ranking I got the most heat for, but I stood by it because of what I dove into and just saw and what the situation was compared to what the output was. Like, he had by far the most yak yards and the lowest average depth of target, meaning he had the most yards after catch for his receivers, the lowest depth of target, meaning he wasn't really throwing it farther than just slants and stuff like that. That was the case last year. Now, obviously, he had a down year. And you can say, hey, there were guys that, they were injured, this and that. Like, they didn't have the full repertoire of players that were there. But the way I look at it is Brock Purdy didn't have a literal super team and graded, last year when he had a super team, he barely graded in the top 10. And now he didn't have a super team. And it definitely was going down a lot. Again, I want to be very clear. He's not bad. Brock Purdy is not a bad quarterback. Brock Purdy is not a whatever quarterback. He is a solid to borderline good quarterback in my opinion. But in totality, like, the grades for the 49ers receiving core this year, and in regards to like their offensive line with pass blocking, run blocking, rushing, receiving, it was all still in like the top 8 to 13 range. Like, it's like, hey, you might have McCaffrey out. Jordan Mason was not bad because you have the literal best play caller in the NFL, arguably, at least top 3 in Kyle Shanahan, which absolutely needs to be brought up way more than it does with talking about the actual pure talent of these quarterbacks. He graded around 15th in passing. He had the lowest big-time play percentage and the highest turnover-worthy play percentage of anyone in that top 15 range. So I think even then you could say the being in the top 15 is almost even still part of the kind of situation he has going on. I think he can finish this year better than some of the guys that maybe are above him, sure, at least stats-wise for sure, but I don't think it's going to like, he did take a little bit of step up as well. I do understand that, but again, I have him dropping 4. You have him dropping 2, but you have him 9 spots higher, and a majority do as well. So I understand that. But I mean, again, I expect improvement. Ayuk is back. CMC is there. We'll see what Ricky Pearsall does. But I really prefer, like, I'm looking, okay, if I were to put these guys that are ahead of him on the same team, how would they do? And just like last year, I think a lot of guys would do the same, if not better. Like, I don't think people understand how good the situation was. And the 1 year, it's not perfect. And still, like I said, they had top 8 to 13 in all offensive stats except passing. And they couldn't even make the playoffs. I feel like all these guys ahead of him, if they had that, with the best play caller in the NFL, are making the playoffs, let alone winning, 6 games? So that's my issues there. And guess what? As I just mentioned on the last podcast episode, they paid him, and they will not win a Super Bowl while Brock Purdy's under that contract. And they'll win maybe at most 3 playoff games while he's under that contract. At most. And even then, I wouldn't bet on that, especially with how the division, looks in terms of coaching wise. So, yeah, Brock Purdy actually goes down for me in my rankings. Again, not bad, but I have him at 23. You have him at 14. So definitely much higher. What are your follow-up thoughts after my giant ramble with Brock Purdy?
Yeah, I think you're disrespecting it a little bit because I think there's a way to look at this a little bit differently. So I think even when you look at NFL quarterbacks, you've got the ones that can carry a team, and then you've got the ones that need a good team around them to be successful. And so some of the players that can carry a team, as we look at, is like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Like, we know those quarterbacks. But there's a lot of handful of other quarterbacks that need a good team around them to be good. And I think somebody like Jared Goff is a very similar type of quarterback where he needs a really good situation to also perform. And you look at the Lions, they got a great O line, they got the best running game, they got good receivers, they had the best play caller. He looks really good. But then before that, when he didn't have that for the Lions, they were winning 3 games. They were one of the worst teams in the league. So I think he's somebody that's kind of in that mold. I think somebody like maybe Geno Smith, or I think somebody like Tua, kind of they're very dependent on their situation. I think that's very similar for Brock Purdy. Where I differ a little bit is last season. I don't think he played well by any means, but I think you're a little bit underselling kind of what the 49ers were dealing with because Trent Williams, he missed probably I think at least half the season. Brandon Ayuk, he was bad after he got paid because he skipped all of training camp pretty much, and then he tore his entire knee. So the number one receiver was out, Debo Samuel. He missed I think a couple of games, but even when he plays, Debo isn't a receiver where you're saying, okay, Debo, go run me a post route, go run me a comeback. He's not a traditional receiver. So him being your number one target, I don't think is great. You had Ricky Pearsall, the guy they drafted. He missed games too because he got shot like before the season began. And then I think when you take into consideration all those injuries, and then Christian McCaffrey, obviously, he's a big part of their receiving game too, like out of the backfield. They didn't really have a receiving threat out of the backfield. I mean, Jordan Mason, you said he had a couple good games. I think even then he got hurt, and they didn't have him for a few games. So they dealt with a ton of different things. It just kind of seemed like a perfect storm almost of just bad luck and bad things for the 49ers last year. And I don't put all of that on Purdy and just saying, okay, it's all his fault why they were bad. I think what it does show us, though, is that he can't carry a team. But I already kind of knew that about him, that he wasn't going to be somebody that could carry a team and get them to the playoffs or to those heights if he didn't have a great supporting cast around him. Because I am a fan of a team that has one of those quarterbacks. But I think Purdy is better than Tua, for example, because we've seen him be able to move and extend plays better than Tua. He doesn't get hurt like Tua does. And we've also seen him win playoff games and step up in big moments. And we haven't seen Tua or other quarterbacks do that. So when I look at Purdy, I don't have him in the top 12 or top 10 range. I don't think he's that good. I wouldn't have paid him the big contract because I don't believe in paying good quarterbacks great money. I just think it's very hard to win that way. But I think when we're evaluating Purdy and comparing him to just other quarterbacks around the league, we got to take into consideration kind of what he is asked to do, what he's supposed to be doing for the 49ers. And that's really just be a system kind of quarterback and just be a game manager. That's what he's supposed to be doing. Maybe make a couple plays off script and not carry a team. So I think when I just view him as in that lens, I would take him over Tua. I would take him over Geno Smith. I think I would just take him more than those guys. But when I get some of your points that you're making, I think he's a very polarizing player. But that's kind of where I sit on it. Where I guess you could say I'm a little bit higher. I don't even know. I just think I have a little bit more respect for Purdy because I've at least seen him play pretty good in some playoff games, and he played pretty good in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs and maybe actually you could argue outplayed Mahomes in that game. So I just think I'm going to give him a little bit more credit than you do because I don't think it's all kind of the supporting cast. I think we saw Jimmy G in that supporting cast, and he wasn't as good as Purdy was numbers wise, or even just watching kind of the offense. So I think that's kind of my take on it, and I think 14 to 17 range. I think is a fair spot. I mean, I think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, I mean, the stuff you bring up about game manager, yeah, maybe I could have Goff a little bit lower. I just think the fact that we've seen it in two different offenses is a pretty big deal for me. And again, I think I'm just saying, hey, the guys above him, if they were on that team or if they're on the team right now, are they probably going to be better? And I think the answer is yes. I think that we are not emphasizing enough, like literally having the most yards after catch, literally having the lowest average depth of target. I mean, the situation that was the case like last year, I think I can maybe give a little bit more grace for. I mean, they still just as a team, like the biggest issue was, obviously defense, which maybe that's kind of the case of why they didn't make the playoffs, but there were even still some offensive issues, in there. And I think, I actually have Tua ranked, which we'll get into it. I have him ranked one spot higher. than Brock Purdy, because I think just as a pure quarterback, I've seen way more talented stuff just as a pure passer and just player from Tua than Purdy. But I understand the playoff stuff. But I just think, again, like, I think it's being understated how great of a situation it is, and taking into account, okay, this is just him as a pure player. Like, as a pure player, this is what we're looking at. And I think, going into next year, like, I'm doing a little bit of projecting. So let's say, I don't know, there's probably like 4 or 5 guys that are ahead of him on my list, that maybe 6 that he played better than. There's probably 6 that he played better than, maybe a little bit more on my list. So if I'm like, okay, I just want to go based on how they were, last year or 2 years ago or whatever, like very recent, he could probably be like 17 for me or something like that. But I'm doing a lot of projecting. I think a guy that we'll get into later, Dak Prescott, had a bad year last year. None of us are having Dak below Brock at this point. But Brock was better than Dak last year. Jalen Hurts 2 years ago was not that good. Like, a lot of people had Brock Purdy, like, because he was better than him. But no one is saying that right now, and I don't even think they should have said that at the moment at all. Anyways, so a lot of it is doing some kind of projecting, obviously. And yes, he was better than Jimmy, but I still don't think Jimmy, like, there's a reason they didn't pay him as much, like, he wasn't getting this massive bag, at least in terms of percentage of the cap, as these guys. And yeah, I do think, he definitely was not as just nothing burger as Jimmy Garoppolo was in the playoffs. He wasn't some kind of elevator at all. And I still think, the stuff you bring up about guys that can elevate others / guys that need him, like, if you put, I don't think that really matters. If you put Joe Burrow on this team, they're winning the Super Bowl. Like, so it's not like it's like, okay, you're purely an elevator, and if you're with better players, then there's not much elevating you can do. Like, no, they're still going to be literally the MVP, So I think just with how the situation wasn't picture perfect and how much worse it got, again, was he the 23rd best quarterback next year or last year? No, he wasn't. I'll say that. He was not. He was much better than that. But I'm doing a bit of projecting here. I am. And I think in terms of the playoff stuff, I really think the situation matters a ton. And we're going to get into that with another quarterback that I actually have ranked a lot higher, but it's hard to find a place to lower him just based on how this stuff works. I know there might be some contradictions here and there with certain stuff, but again, the reason I think the biggest one for me that stood out was Jared Goff that you brought up. I have Goff higher because of how he did it in 2 separate offenses that has happened, and I think the playoffs wives, they have not been too dissimilar, and I think Purdy has been just like fine in the playoffs, not bad, but I think the situation is being understated for how great it has been, and we'll see how that ages, but I think that they are not going to reach the heights that they had. I think they peaked, and now that they paid him, I think the situation is only going to get worse, and he's not an elevator. And I think that's kind of my take there. So we'll see what happens there. But starting off at 22, you have Aaron Rodgers. I have Tua. You have Drake May at 21. I have Bo Nix at 21. You have Tua at 20. Like I said, I had him at 22. I have Drake May at 20. So we are one spot apart with Drake May. Darnold, you have 19. At 19, I have Caleb Williams. So I have Caleb Williams a bit higher. You had him at 23. And then at 18, you have Kyler Murray. And for me at 18, I have Bryce Young. So let's go ahead. I know on the screen you'll see some guys higher or lower. Let's go ahead and start off with a guy that I talked about, one that I was, very adamant about. Maybe you're not as adamant about this guy, but he is your starting quarterback, whether you like it or not. As a Dolphins fan, give me your Tua synopsis, because I'm actually a little bit lower, but in the same area. I have him at 22. You have him at 20. He falls 8 spots for me, 6 spots for you. What, as a Dolphins fan who watches every game, is your ranking and synopsis of Tua Tagovailoa?
Actually, very surprised that I have him higher than you. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think at this point I'm kind of just waiting out the time. I think this could be there's a chance this could be just the last year that he's at least our are full
I know
time
you're hoping
or
for that.
yeah, yeah, I am. But I think at this point, what Tua is just a severely limited quarterback who is in an offense and surrounded by players that maximize what he does well. And what he does well is throw over the middle of the field using timing, using anticipation. But in terms of throwing outside the numbers, in terms of running the football, extending plays, um, in terms of being able to stay healthy or elevate an offense, play in the cold, show up in big games, he's not going to be doing any of that. We have a 5 year record now of him getting hurt 4 out of those 5 years. We have a record of him. I don't even know if he's won a game like under. I'm sure you could find the stats like under 40 degrees or something. I'm sure he's got a very poor record in that. So we have evidence of that now. We've got his evidence against winning teams. He was like 1-6 against them. We won 11 games back in I think 2023 it was. And then this past year again we were not good against winning teams. So I think we have all the evidence that we need to call him a solid starter. I mean, he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, but um, you kind of know at this point what you're getting. The most injury prone, probably quarterback or player. Even you could probably go as far as player in NFL history. Somebody that is definitely very limited. Again, throwing outside the numbers, scrambling. I mean, you can't run quarterback sneaks with them. You can't. He really can't extend plays without being a big threat to get hurt. So I think when you take into consideration his arm, probably got a bottom five arm in the league. He's probably got bottom five athleticism in the league. He's got bottom five durability in the league. The only really good thing he's got is he's accurate over the middle of the field, and he's got some good anticipation. I don't think he reads the field very well either. I don't think he can go 1, 2, 3, 4. Go off my first read quick. I mean, that's a big thing that Dolphin fans and Tua fans will argue a lot that Tua is some Drew Brees esque kind of clone. He's very smart. He's very accurate. If you really just take a look at Mike McDaniel's offense and what he asked Tua to do, it's basically say hike, look off the linebacker, and throw it to my first read. And when that's open, Tua can be really good at that. But so can most quarterbacks in the league. I think it's when that kind of breaks down and needs to go to a second or third read, or he needs to break out of the pocket and make something happen, or he needs to do an off-platform throw. Those are things that he really struggles with, and so I think the Dolphins are going to be not good next year. I think I'd be surprised if they even won 8 games. I think I see them depending on how many games Tua misses as like a 5-6 win team. I already bet them actually to be the worst team in the league next
Of
year.
course you did.
I see a path for it. I definitely see a path that this is the least
I'm not
talented team.
gonna. I'm not gonna, disagree.
It's
I
the
mean, I'm
least
not saying that, but I don't know.
it's the least talented team we've had in years, and I think if Tua gets hurt, we've already seen when backup quarterbacks come in and try to execute the Tua offense. Because you know what, let me touch on that quickly too, and I'll let you go. That's another big thing is everybody's like, oh, you see the difference once Tua's out of the game and these backup quarterbacks come in, they can't run the offense. Well, yeah, it's really hard to run a very RPO centric and timing based offense
Hey,
when you
Tyler Huntley, go ahead and do that for me.
yeah, when you have no experience saying hike, going back 2 steps, and then firing it, no looking to like a linebacker, and then firing it to Tyreek Hill in the middle of the field. Tua has a very distinct set of skill set. I'm not arguing that. He's got a very distinct skill set that not many quarterbacks have, but the offense is so tailored to those skill sets that no kidding, when a quarterback that doesn't exactly have a ton of experience with those kind of things step in, they're not as good. Obviously, that's kind of what happens. So I think that's another just really dumb argument that people bring up to prop up Tua. But I think there's definitely a path for the Dolphins if he gets hurt, and Zach Wilson comes in, and then the team kind of quits on McDaniel. I could just see him bottoming him out. But that's kind of my take, my long-winded way of saying that I think Tua is a bottom half starter in the league, and he's paid like a top 10 quarterback. So it's great.
Yeah. So we had him like 14th, the same last year, and I think it's not like we were that different into, at least definitely you, in terms of your synopsis right now. But I think it's more so like it's one thing saying that a quarterback is like this and that. It's another thing actually seeing it, and then when that actually sometimes is the case, I think you end up having to you have to reflect the real life stuff in your rankings. And I think, we could have said the same stuff last year, but he was ranked 14th, and now based on the year he had, he's ranked in the 20s. And I actually am shocked, or I was shocked at the end, and I'm like, wow, I had him this low. But I think the biggest thing for me is that he's above Brock Purdy, because I think you bring up all that stuff. Brock Purdy, I mean, with Tua, I think the injury stuff is definitely a concern. I think I'm more so looking at just all right, him as a quarterback, like right now, like what is he and everything. And so I think he's shown way more regular season, just pure success, just any given play, any given down, any given game. Like I've seen more success out of Tua, and they've had, a relatively similar situation. I mean, it's literally Mike McDaniel coming over from the 49ers. They have these good receivers and players. The Niners are better though. Like again, emphasizing Purdy had the best situation when they went to the Super Bowls, and last year that wasn't the case. And, with Tua, I think another guy that you can kind of correlate this to is Dak Prescott, because Dak Prescott, both of these guys were ranked higher, and they did not have good years last year. Obviously, some injury stuff in there. But the reason I move him down lower than you is because of the situation. I think it's getting actively worse for Tua. Last year, he was graded 28th in terms of passing grade. It seemed like he was just used very conservatively a lot. He had the lowest average depth of target last year, and his big-time throw percentage, turnover-worthy play percentage of his personal career was the lowest last year, literally lower than his rookie year, which is kind of crazy. I mean, again, obviously accuracy, good. Like, bad throws was still pretty solid. The accuracy is still pretty solid in terms of didn't make as many bad throws. Had a lot of good accurate throws, and in my opinion, the reason he's above Brock Purdy. I just think he's a better quarterback. But now when we look at it, I would definitely prefer to see a full healthy year before I think he's in the top 20, at least for me, and at least even just anywhere close to where he was before. And I mean, I bring up the situation like Tyreek Hill, he's probably gone, right? I mean, Tyreek Hill is probably gone. Teron Armstead retired, so the offensive line is worse, and it wasn't even that good. Your head coach is objectively on the hot seat, like he just is. And the play calling last year, I think he did a poor job, and just kind of what you mentioned of actually mixing up and calling of the players that he had on the field. I didn't think he did a great job of doing that, and I think with Tua, like, yeah, you could have him like 15 to 17. I'm okay with that. This is just a personal thing, kind of for definitely Mathis, but just me when I just kind of look at it, definitely lower than I thought. But the lowering is because of the situation for me. Maybe if it was the same situation or whatever, maybe he'd be around 17, 18, something like that. But I think the situation is the biggest thing. And I mean, again, preaching on Tua over Purdy, I mean, I know Tua has the issue with – I'm not disputing that at all. That's 100% true. If he played in San Fran, I mean, has Purdy played a road game in the cold? No, he literally hasn't. It was one time against Philly, and he didn't even obviously get to play because he got hurt. Even then, that's a giant question mark if he would have even done well. So it's not like you can say he does, because he hasn't done that at all. So, just as a talking point there, I think even for that of why Tua above Purdy, it's not like Purdy is doing that actively over Tua. But enough about Brock Purdy. People want me to shut up about him. But yeah, Tua, I mean, situation getting worse, so kind of unfortunate there. Do you have any other, since it's your guy, do you have any other stuff to respond to with what I had brought up?
I mean, not really. I'm just hoping it's the last kind of year. I just want to root for a quarterback that you just got you just got some upside with. I mean, maybe he doesn't hit, but you've got somebody with a big arm with some athleticism, and it's kind of up in the air if they develop or not. I just want something new now because I've had a guy that's limited, and we see how good he can get. I want to see now a high ceiling, maybe low floor kind of guy. So hopefully next year's draft class is pretty loaded. So I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for that.
Yeah, we'll see. So we went over to let's go over. I know we're jumping around the the board a little bit here. Let's go ahead and go backwards a little bit. I had Sam Darnold at 24. You had him at 19. He goes up 13 spots from last year for you and me, both up 13. So kind of the same thing. I view him slightly lower. What's your kind of quick synopsis for Sam Darnold? You have at 19.
I just thought the totality of last season, he looked like a above average quarterback. I know the end of the season wasn't great, but I'm not going to throw out majority of his season for those couple games. Obviously, a really good situation in Minnesota, so that's why I never viewed him as like a top 12, top 10 quarterback, although he kind of play like that for majority of the season. But I think if he can do it in Seattle and have a similar type of season and success as he did last year, we'll be talking about him rising up even more. But I just think at this point he's a middle tier quarterback, and if I had to start a game tomorrow, I would take him over somebody like Tua, for example.
Yeah, definitely not the season he had in terms of like the rankings. Actually, like he was actually objectively a top 10 quarterback at least regular season last year. But I think it has to take into account like the potential postseason stuff. But his season was objectively great, like top 5 in yards and touchdowns. He was 6th in passer rating. Now, the entire year, I kind of kept my reservations about him in regards to how good he actually was, and I think that showed in the last game of the year and in the playoffs. But I think in totality, his grades were a bit lower than the actual stats. He was around like 14. It's kind of similar to like the first good comeback year for Geno and for Mayfield. Kind of similar first year when both of those guys actually had a first like actual solid year there. Like the stats maybe were a little bit better than what they actually were, but then after that, both of them I think totally improved. So I think it's very realistic that Sam Darnold could end up doing that. It's just both of those guys had the same situation. Sam Darnold is going to a brand new situation, which worries me a bit. Last year with the Vikings, had a really good offensive line and tackle group, receivers, great play caller, awesome situation. When the offensive line got hurt a little bit with Christian Darrisaw and they brought in Cam Robinson, we really started to see the cracks, which they came around midseason. I mean, if you look the week after Christian Darrisaw left and got injured, it really was getting worse. So I think that's a pretty big deal. And now he goes to Seattle, who had probably the worst offensive line last year. I mean, realistically, and they added one guy who's a rookie, who I really love, in Gray Zabel, but still, he's an interior guy as well. They had the worst offensive line last year, and they added one real guy, and he's a rookie. So I would like to see another year of good play to promptly move him up, but the surrounding situation of the Vikings definitely needs to be taken into account, and in my opinion was better. And I think Seattle, to be honest, I think they paid for a downgrade in quarterback this year, which is unfortunate for them. I don't think it was as much money, but it was still a good amount of money. So we'll see maybe by how much of a downgrade, if it is a downgrade at all. In my opinion, I think it is. And with Darnold, I mean, what's the issue? Oh, pressure. Like sometimes under pressure, he freaks out. And where's he going? The worst offensive line, at least bottom 5. So that kind of concerns me as well. Were you going to say something?
Oh no, I'm all good. I agree on all your points with him. It is interesting, yeah. I think even going back to when he's playing for the Jets, kind of just the seeing ghost and struggling
Seeing
under
ghosts,
pressure.
yeah.
That's always been kind of his Achilles heel. So we'll see if Seattle can protect him. But it'll be fun to watch in a new situation.
Yeah, hopefully that goes well for them. Then let's get to each person's 21. Get a little more on track here as we talked about all the guys below. I have Bo Nix at 21. You have him a good amount higher. You have Drake May at 21, and I have him at 20. Let's go ahead and start with Drake May. So he goes up 13 spots for both of us. Again, we were pretty similar in where we had these guys moving up compared to last year. And I think we're pretty spot on in terms of where he was. Like, yeah, he was going to be much lower last year. He was basically around where we had him last year in terms of because of the situation. Not saying him purely, but because the situation is so much better, like I think it goes up. You had Caleb Williams at 23. I had him at 19. So I have these guys kind of combined. So you can see I have a lot of the second year players together: Nix, May, and Williams. Let's go ahead and go over these trio here. Let's start off with Caleb, or no, let's start off with Bo Nix, actually. You have Bo Nix, I'll spoil it. You have him at 15, and I have him at 21. So you're definitely much higher, and that's probably where the consensus is. So I'll go ahead and just start off for my Bo Nix analysis. He went up 18 spots for you, by the way, at 15. He went up 9 for me at 21. So I was a little bit higher on him even just going in, but I'm now lower. And I think, again, I get if he's higher. I understand. I think this is around the range where he's going to be. Maybe I'm a little bit lower in this range, which, I think it's just the success for him is definitely better than a lot of people expected in Denver, obviously. I just don't know how much better he's going to be. And I think if you objectively look, like, he was probably closer to this area. And I think there's other guys on this list that are like, oh my God, I think he's going to be this much better next year. Nix, his rookie year, played better than guys ahead of him on this list, for sure. 100% agree. He played better than Caleb Williams and Drake May. Obviously, there's no disputing that. But in terms of what I'm looking at for this upcoming season, I think some are probably expecting some kind of like progression here. But I think a lot of other guys, I think are just going to progress more, and I really don't think Bo Nix is going to, because that's what the case was coming out. Like, there's a reason he was the last quarterback picked in the first round. Now, it was higher, but there's a reason for that. He's kind of what he is right now. He was around this range in basically all of the grades, big time throws, turnover worthy plays, like all this stuff. He did a real good job doing everything he can to take care of the ball, which is a pretty big deal. I think that was great, both passing and rushing, and he does run a good amount. Didn't really turn it over a lot. I think we look at the year maybe in a little bit better light than it actually technically was, because of where people thought the Broncos would be. Now, it's not bad at all. It's just I think maybe we're looking at it a little bit too high. I think, last year, like, he really didn't have a run game, so that should definitely improve. The weapons were like fine, and they got more, so that should definitely improve. The offensive line, though, was like top 3. It was amazing. So great offensive line. So maybe that helped with some of the pressure stuff. They add some rookies to the offensive group. I think they're going to improve the team. And Bo Nix stats, I think, I think definitely for last year, you could say are better than, Dak Prescott's, Aaron Rodgers, Trevor Lawrence's of the world. And if those guys disappoint for another year, I think I have no problem moving Bo Nix ahead of them. And again, I have both, May, Williams, and I mean, you could, see it on screen, but at the top here, Bryce Young, which I'll get into him later. I have all 3 of those ahead of him, and all 3 of those did not have as good years. So odds that all 3 of those have better years, maybe that's not the case, and I'm fine having Bo Nix up. So again, not something I'm down or like willing to die on a hill, because I don't think so. Funny enough, I had him, I literally wrote it right here. I think his range is 21 to 15, and you have him at 15. So I'm just lower on the range, and you're just higher on where we think his range is. But I think with his age and talent, I think that's kind of why I have him there, along with just having a super awesome coach at his disposal.
I was really impressed with Bo Nix as a rookie, actually. I saw some of his talent, but I think his physical talent impressed me, I think, even a little bit more than I thought as a rookie. Just his ability to run around, his mobility, and even his arm talent. I thought he had maybe like a mid to below average arm. I think he's got a pretty good arm. I mean, he was throwing some 60-yard seeds down the field to various weapons for the Broncos. So I'm a little bit higher, I think, on his talent, his physical talent. And I think even like if he doesn't improve a ton, which I think is fair to say, as he is, one of the already older, quote unquote, younger quarterbacks in the league, entering year number 2 at what, like 25 years old, probably. So maybe he doesn't improve a ton, but even if it's just a little bit, I still think that could end up being a top 10 to 12 quarterback, because last year as a rookie, he did have over 30 combined touchdowns. And I'm just curious to see anybody in his draft class. When does that happen? When do we see Caleb have 30 combined touchdowns in a season? When do we see Michael Penix have 30
Maybe next
combined
year.
touchdowns? Maybe next year, or maybe they never do it, or maybe it's in a few years. So I think Bo Nix actually had a really good rookie season. Obviously, started off a little bit slow. I don't think he was great the first few weeks, but I mean, he was a rookie, kind of getting adjusted to the NFL. I think towards the end of the season was really when we saw him kind of hit his stride a little bit. And you mentioned the weapons a little bit. I don't think he had a great arsenal of weapons to throw to. And I mean, he had Cortland Sutton, who's more of kind of a 50-50 jump ball kind of receiver. And I mean, kind of just a bunch of jags outside of him. And then Javonte Williams at running back. I mean, it really wasn't much. I know the offensive line played good. I know he had Sean Payton, but I think that was going to be the worst iteration of the Broncos was this past year. And they improved the defense a ton. I'm pretty bullish on Bo Nix again, taking another step, maybe having another 30 touchdown season, and the Broncos making the playoffs again. I think it's going to be a little bit tough this year in the AFC West. The Chiefs are still going to be good. The Chargers got better. The Raiders got a lot better. But I mean, I think the Broncos are going to be a really good team again next year, and I think Bo Nix is going to be kind of the catalyst to do that. I'm just pretty high on what he showed last year, and I'm a pretty big fan of Bo.
Yeah, I think they'll be good. Again, I think a lot of the way I view him is just, okay, objectively as a guy, like, what are you? And if other guys were on other teams, like, how would they be? And I just think having one of the best offensive lines is a giant plus. And a lot of guys would take. Like, Quinn Miners had an awesome year again. Garrett Bowles, Mike McGlinchey they signed, which was a great signing. Ben Powers. A lot of good stuff there. And then, yeah, I think, like you mentioned, I think running game is going to improve a ton. It's just very heavily weighted on if RJ Harvey is, good there. And I actually really like RJ Harvey, so I think he will be. And then receivers, yeah, I don't think they were not as good. I think Cortland Sutton's like, a starting caliber guy for sure. Devon Vele was pretty solid, I think a little underrated there. But it was kind of just a combination of people. It's almost like the Bills, guys doing different roles. Marvin Mims, Troy Franklin. They add Pat Bryant, who I liked, but he also is just kind of he's going to play a role. He's not going to really be some kind of standout guy anyways. So, yeah, do you think they're is probably expected, like, okay, general improvement. I just don't know. I feel like just as a player, like, yeah, could be improvement for sure. But it's almost like with, Purdy a little bit. Like, okay, we're going to have these guys. Like, yeah, it's going to reflect. But, when certain stuff happens, are you going to be better? And I think definitely that's why I have him ranked higher. I think, no, at least for me, is that, yeah, he will be. And he showed, like, with the situation he had, was literally, better than the stuff we saw with Purdy. I know you got to take into account playoffs and everything. I mean, they didn't have a chance in the playoff game. He was not bad in the playoff game. He actually wasn't. It was just they had no chance because of the team diff. But, yeah, I don't dispute anything you're saying. Again, I just am projecting a little bit with guys that I think are going to take a step up based on their talent. And we can get into those two guys here. I have them back-to-back. Drake May at 20. Caleb Williams at 19. You have Caleb Williams at 23, Drake May at 21. So we can talk about these guys in tandem. They had similar rookie years in regards to production with both Drake May and Caleb Williams. And these are, I think, obviously one of definitely the hardest ones to predict, but kind of the most simple, like, okay, they're probably going to get better. And we'll we got to see kind of where they are after year one. I think they could be much higher or lower than this for both of these guys. Maybe one is much better, one's much worse. They're together in tandem. It's really hard to predict. I just had them, together. Both had very similar passer rating and PFF grades, both like 33 and 32. So for last year, definitely kind of lower. Both had around 400 rushing yards. I think both are clear for improvements. For last year, the situations, they each had new head coaches now, a lot of new talent. I think much better situations for each guy. So that's why I have both of them higher because, I mean, it's not, I know we look at it of like, oh, it doesn't matter what they were ranked in the draft, this and that. It's like, okay, well, it's still objectively like they're high, went high because of the talent they have. And you're picturing, all right, if the situation is a certain amount of, good enough, that talent will improve and reflect itself. And that's why I have both of them above Bo Nix and other guys on this list and Brock Purdy, because I think the situations have gotten much better. Now, Drake May's situation was much worse, and they had the same stuff. So if you have Drake May above Caleb Williams, I have no problem with that. I just think when we look at it, like, Caleb Williams' situation, I think, is just so good. I think it is insanely good. All the offensive line changes, draft usage for weapons like heavily. Ben Johnson, who I do think is a top 5 play caller in the NFL, maybe top 3. Now, the Patriots have a lot of good additions, too. Their head coach, I think, is so much better. They got some weapons. They addressed the offensive line in the draft, but it is just not the same. And don't think it's the same because it's not. It really isn't. The Patriots did a good job helping it. It's going to need another year at the minimum. It 100% is. And with the Bears, like, they're, at least team-wise, are just a step ahead in terms of just where they are placed, because this offense looks great. And I think I do trust May a bit more, obviously, from what I've seen, than Caleb Williams. But Caleb showed much more upside under pressure, which I think is a big deal as a rookie. Like, pretty massive deal, because a lot of guys as rookies, that's their biggest flaw. And he actually showed some upside under pressure. Caleb Williams did. So again, I think I expect improvements from both. I think Drake May, if you have him higher, that's fine. I just think the only reason Caleb Williams is higher for me is because the situation is much better. But that's how good I expect these guys to be. I think there's definitely massive steps up. And that's why I have them over the likes of Bo Nix, Tua, Brock, Darnold, guys like that. You have May pretty similar, Williams a little bit lower. What's your takes on those guys?
Yeah, I just think May and Caleb, were pretty similar. I mean, they had bad situations last year, as you mentioned. I just think that Caleb had better weapons, better just players to throw the ball to. May really had nobody, so that's why I gave May the slight edge heading into this year. But the thing with them is they didn't really play any meaningful games last year. I mean, I feel like towards the end of the season they were down by 20 points or whatever by the second half, and so a lot of their numbers and a lot of their like big plays, it's kind of irrelevant because they weren't really playing against a real defense. And that's why I give somebody like Bo Nix a little bit more credit because they were in the playoff mix and he was playing up against real defenses and having to play like from behind at times and actually have to come back in some games. So I think my list is a little more catered to if I was playing a game tomorrow. Who would I want on my team? I can definitely see how by the end of next season, I could definitely see Caleb having a huge breakout season and leaping up until even like the top 10. Like that's definitely in the realm of possibility. Same thing, I guess you could say for Drake May. Um, but I just think right now, if I was just going to rank these quarterbacks, that's kind of how I would have it. I think Caleb had some splash plays last year, kind of always what he did at USC. But as I said earlier about Cam Ward, being able to play in the confines of the offense and go play by play basis of finding receivers and staying in the pocket and just actually executing plays the way they're supposed to be executed, he really struggled with that. And I don't think a lot of people kind of anticipated that from happening because he was seen as some generational player. And obviously, he's got a lot of talent, and it wasn't all his fault. The offensive line, the coaching staff, all that was bad. There's no doubt about it. But I don't. I also don't absolve him from all of his misfortune as well. I think he was definitely a little bit more raw in terms of actually playing the quarterback position than we kind of all thought. But I do think again, May and Caleb could have big jumps this year. I'm just gonna bet on Bo kind of continuing his success and waiting and seeing May and Caleb do that before I over project it or whatnot. So that's kind of my thought process with where I have each of those ranked.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to focus more on the upsides, I think, for both of these and the downsides, because I think it's obvious, like, yeah, they were not obviously as good. But, I mean, I don't know, you brought up the meaningful game stuff. I mean, the Bears had overtime games with the Vikings, 1-point losses to the Packers, 3-point losses to the Bears, the Lions, 2-point losses to the Packers. So I think that, they were definitely in some games.
Well,
The
what I
Patriots
what
had
I mean is,
overtime
I mean
games,
early
Rams.
early in the season more so. I think the Bears once they fired their coach and they were already eliminated from the playoffs, none of those games really like. There's no amplified pressure of like, okay, our offense has really got to get things going today. Like the last game against the Packers, it's kind of like it's a throw it out of the window. Like it's not a relevant game. Where I think Bo Nix, while the Broncos are competing to make the playoffs, there's a lot more inherent pressure of him being able to perform and play well. Where Caleb, there's no expectations anymore once they're out of the playoffs and their whole coaching staff has been fired. So I just think what I mean by that is you can feel a little bit more free and kind of just do whatever once your season's kind of over. And for May and Caleb, halfway through the year or around Thanksgiving, that was their season was pretty much over at that point. So that's just kind of what I mean by that. I know they played in some games early in
I
the
guess you mean the
season.
pressure there. I mean, I kind of view it as just like, all right, how are they looking? Like, are they good? And the Broncos, they lost to the Chargers and the Bengals back to back before they had Week 18 in a meaningless Chiefs game where they didn't play
That
anybody and won 38-0.
that game
So
against
I don't know about the end of the year
the
pressure
game of
there.
the against the Bengals though, Bo Nix played really well. He had a duel
It was
against
overtime. He
yeah,
was good.
it was a duel against Burrow in that game. I think even the Chargers game was a pretty good game too, if I remember correctly. But I don't know. That's just what I mean by that.
So those guys are there. And then last on this kind of 18 list, at least for me, is Bryce Young. You have Bryce Young at 25. Did you think I would have him in this range as a Panthers fan?
Oh yeah, for sure. I knew you would have him.
But I am an objective ranker here. But where did you think I would have Bryce Young?
Yeah, I thought 18 probably kind of in this range, like early, or I guess late teens is what you would call it. I thought that would probably be where you would have him.
Okay, yeah. So I think maybe some are shocked I have him above Bo Nix, May, and Williams, and that's totally fine. This is and Tua and Purdy and so I understand. But again, one of the more shocking / like I'm going out on a limb on this one, and I'm fine with that. But I think I have the projections to back it up 100%. And if it was, if he was higher than this next year, I honestly would not be surprised. My thoughts on him the whole year have definitely changed, but I think Ben Stern, like the beginning of the season, he was horrendous. He was terrible. He was very scared. He didn't know what to do. He was super giddy passing. It was in his own head, 100%. He absolutely needed to be benched, and all the effing morons on ESPN and everywhere else just called him off, said, all right, he's done, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, horrendous analysis by all of those guys because they didn't watch the games at all because they were, one, saying how it was stupid that they benched him, why'd they do that, when, I mean, he's coming off of a horrendous rookie year with a horrendous situation, brand new coach. You could tell he was in his own head. You could literally tell. Andy Dalton comes in. He needed to the next game because it's hard to just run out there and be that anemic on offense when you have the option to not be like that. Like the Browns, sometimes they don't have an option. Sometimes they just don't. Sometimes they have to throw out Dorian Thompson-Robinson because they have to. Or the 49ers in their playoff game 2 years ago versus the Eagles when Purdy got hurt and their backups got hurt. Like sometimes you have to throw guys out there. The Panthers had an option not to. And the head coach is not trying to, just stick this out randomly and just suck, like when a head coach in that same job got fired after 1 year, literally. So throws in Andy Dalton, has 3 touchdowns, obviously comes back down to earth, and Bryce Young comes in, and he absolutely needed a reset. He needed a reset on what the expectations were, what the offense was like, what Canales wanted to look for. Sometimes you just need that in-game stuff to then be like, all right, this is what we're going to change here. I think mental aspects in just any sports is a massive deal. Like it is a gigantic deal. And after he comes back in, obviously looks so much better. Since coming back from his benching, which was, I don't know, week 7 or 8. So week 8, let's say like 10, or I'd say 11 games, I think, or maybe 10 games. So a good portion of the season. He graded top 7 in PFF throwing and offensive grades. He was only below Joe Burrow in big-time throws in that span. He had the second lowest yards after catch per reception. So by that, meaning any given throw, how many extra yards do their receivers, produce? Meaning, okay, how good are my weapons around me? That's essentially what it's saying. Obviously, I bring that up with Purdy of how amazing his was. Bryce Young's was horrible. Literally the second lowest. He was 30th in play action yards. Meaning they could hardly get actual good play action stuff going because they didn't really have receivers capable of taking advantage of that vertically. He was top 2 in passing grade under pressure. He was only below Justin Herbert in passing grade under pressure. Now, he was definitely high in terms of his bad throws, for sure. There were definitely more bad throws than you would have liked, taking into account the few weeks in the beginning. And I'm sure he still had some bad throws in that 10-week span, but definitely not the same percentage as what it was the first 3 weeks. He had the third highest pressure rate, so he was pressured in terms of the rate of times drop back pressured. It was the third highest, and taking into account all that, he was top 7 and only below Joe Burrow in big time throws. Now the offensive line is good. It's not top tier like Brock Purdy, but it's good. They literally had the worst receiving core. And that's just not my opinion. That's graded. Literally graded the worst receiving core. And if you ask anyone, I'm sure they would, like, Mathis is not going to be like, no, Stone, they didn't have the worst receiving core. You're stupid. Like, no, everyone knows they had the worst receiving core, 100%. Now they add Ted McMillan, top pick. Say what you want about him. Some people high, some people low. I think either way, like, you definitely have optimism there, and that's an upgrade for sure. Xavier Legette going into year 2, which he was always more raw. Jalen Coker and Thielen are back. They're not dynamic, but they were solid. Hunter Renfrow is now healthy. I mean, if he can be what he was, like, even just a little bit, like, that's pretty good. And Tet is just a gigantic add because he brings such a dynamic, helpful playmaking X that they needed, because they didn't have that at all. And it's going to be the first year where Bryce Young actually has the same head coach and playbook from the previous year. So I think, rushing wise, he also really cut down on his rushing last year. He had 6 less fumbles, and he had 6 more touchdowns from this past season to his rookie year. And again, I think this could be higher, to be honest, in my opinion. I don't think many are having here this way, so I'm kind of getting ahead of the curve objectively a little bit. But even in just watching him, like, you could tell there was total improvement. There's total improvement there. Maybe some of the games were against mid defenses, or I think maybe one of them was against a good defense. I mean, do people remember, like, you're literally one Xavier Legette drop away from beating the Super Bowl champions in Philadelphia healthy? Now, am I saying that means the Panthers are going to go to the Super Bowl? No. I don't know if you've seen all the insane stuff about the correlations of the years and the Panthers making the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that, but I think we need to put a little more spotlight objectively on Bryce Young and this Panthers team going into next year, and how good he was with how bad the situation was last year. What are your thoughts on Bryce Young after a Panthers fan just went on his ramble about how good his quarterback is going to be next year?
Yeah, I've been waiting all video to talk a little Bryce Young. So I get your perspective. I have a little bit of a nuance, like just a nuanced, different kind of one, because I was somebody that wasn't as high on Bryce when he was coming out of Alabama. I just said I
True.
don't believe on betting on historic outliers. And he was a historic outlier due to his size, and I just didn't see how that would work out in the NFL. And the first year and a half of his career, that was pretty much right. Whether it was all his fault or not, he just didn't look like a very good player. Admittedly, the second half of last season, he looked a lot better. There's no doubt about it. He looked like a backup, and then he turned into an above average quarterback. Maybe even you could argue better at times than that. So I think that's fair to say. That the thing that I kind of would push back maybe a little bit against is I just want to see it a little bit longer, and then going back again to just the expectations. I want to see at the start of the season when it's 0-0 and your season's not already over and you're playing with nothing to lose again, because I think I just think that is an important element of sometimes when we see quarterbacks step in, and even just can find random backups or veterans across the league where they just kind of step into a situation, rattle off a few good games. I just think it's a little bit different when the bullets are kind of flying at you versus you're just playing with kind of nothing to lose. So that's number one. But I think the big kind of picture thing is I still don't think we know who Bryce Young is. Is he more of the guy that we saw the first year and a half of his career, or is he the guy that we saw the second half of his year? I think it's probably going to be somewhere maybe in the middle is what you could probably safely assume. I just think, again, I watched a few analysis deep dives on Bryce and why he kind of improved. I think one thing was definitely his confidence the second half of the year. But the big technical thing that I thought was interesting was his drop back was, I think, was like almost sped up a little bit. If you've ever watched Bryce Young kind of say hike, he had like a very slow, kind of methodical kind of step back into the pocket. They kind of took those, I think, 4 or 5 weeks when he was sitting out to adjust that. So basically, what he did for most routes, if you had to take like a 5 step drop, Bryce Young would be taking like an 8 step drop instead of the five. But what that would do is that would basically sync up his feet and his timing with the routes of the receivers. So I don't know if that makes sense at all, but essentially, when he was playing early on, Bryce would, his feet just would not be aligned with the routes. So when he was ready to throw the football, his receivers would not be open or ready to catch the ball. Essentially, that's kind of what I took away from watching some of the things. But then another big piece of why he improved was his off script stuff. And so it just seems like, again, the reason why I still have some questions is I don't know how sustainable all of that stuff is. You can't really magnify how good somebody will be off script and playing once the play breaks down every year. And that was a huge reason why Bryce was really good at Alabama, was because of the playmaking stuff he could do. We saw a lot more of that the second half of last year, but before that, he really struggled to play off script the first year and a half Carolina. So I think there's some variance there of how maybe it's not going to be as good as it was the second half of the year, but it's not going to be as bad as it was the first year and a half. And then with his feet and his movement that way, I feel like it's another thing to be. That's another thing that's kind of hard to stay consistent with, because you have, if you have an untraditional kind of drop back and you got to do 9 steps for a traditional 5 step drop. I think that, again, that could be hard to be very consistent on a down to down, week to week kind of basis. So I think for me, I still don't think Bryce is like a super physically gifted player. I mean, he's not very tall. He doesn't have like one of the best arms in the league. It's probably like an average arm. And he's got pretty good movement, but he's not like Kyler Murray running around, who's, the other small quarterback. So I don't think the physical talent is quite there. And I still just have questions about the variance of his play. So I think I could definitely see a world where you add in Tedero McMillan, you have another year with Dave Canales where, hey, he again gets more consistent with his drop back. He just finds a way. He's the huge outlier of the situation, and he can play on time more. And then his playmaking he adds in, and maybe Bryce can be a really good quarterback. And then the Panthers, I think, as a team next year, I think they could be a sneaky, 7, 8, 9 in that kind of mix range next year. I definitely could see that. So that's definitely on the board. But if I was still a betting man and I had to bet on it, I would say that Bryce doesn't emerge as some really good quarterback. But I mean, only time will tell. And seems like a nice guy, so I'll root for him to do it.
Yeah, I think. I mean, you mentioned the pressure or motivation with their season being done by the time they came back. I mean, I understand that. I just think, it's not like they're thinking that, and it's not like the defenses they're playing against, like Kansas City Chiefs week 12, Tampa Bay week 13, Philadelphia week 14, Dallas week 15, Arizona week 16. Atlanta, like, it's not like they're thinking that, considering Atlanta literally had to play for their playoff lives that game. Now, obviously, in real time, we found out they weren't going to make it, but they're not going into the start of the game being like, well, if what
Well,
was that? If this team wins this game,
only
we're
thing
going
I
to not try.
only thing I'd say for that is Atlanta. That's fair point, but if you're like the Chiefs or the Eagles, I don't think you're gonna get as up for a game if you're playing the Panthers versus you're playing some playoff contending team. That's just kind of like what I mean. Like if
I
they,
mean, they still wanted the 1 seed. It was week 14.
I mean, I'm sure they want to
I
win,
guess I
but
understand
I'm
that,
just saying
but
we're all humans, and like if we're going into the game against the Panthers, who are like what 2-10 or whatever, and then versus like if we were playing the Ravens on prime time, who are 10-2, like we're just gonna kind of approach the game in the week differently. But I mean, that's not to take anything away. I'm just saying I think
yeah,
that's an element to
I
add in.
think I understand that. I just think they can go like at halftime, be like, okay, maybe we should try this game. Like I don't think it's like I don't think it comes down to, okay, now it's the final drive in the fourth quarter. Oh wait, maybe we should start actually trying, and then boom, he sucks. Like that. If that was the case, even they still, it would be good for Bryce because they were literally one Xavier Legette drop away from beating Philadelphia at Philadelphia, and they had good games against other teams. I was there for the Kansas City game. I mean, that was awesome for him. And then I was there against Arizona, against a team that they killed their playoff lie. I mean, they had a stretch where they killed off 4 different teams' playoff hopes. That it's not like it was, oh man, it's week 6 or week 7 and the freaking Titans, oh no, they're out of the playoffs. Like, it wasn't like that. It was like the Cardinals, the Falcons, other teams like that. And some of them we thought they were going to end, but they didn't end up doing that with Tampa Bay, who snuck in there. But and then I feel like I just need to help you drop last year. I just need to help you drop it, because I don't think there's necessarily going to be a median between his rookie year and this year. I think it was so bad, and it was literally his rookie year. I mean, if it was like year 3 and then we saw this, like, I could get that if situations were heavily, changed, but situations only getting better, and in totality, the stuff looks worse than what it was based on when he literally came back. I mean, I sorted all the stuff I mentioned was sorted from when he came back, which is not just a 3-week sample size like Michael Penix versus the 2 worst defenses in the NFL. It's 10 weeks versus a bunch of varied defenses. And I'm not saying he was perfect. He had the Dallas game where he had 2 picks. Denver game, 2 picks, also had 2 touchdowns. So it's not like those were all perfect. But I just think maybe it's a little bit of fan stuff. But I also am looking, and all the stuff I said, all the stats, those are all true. And I think in pressure, I think it is something that we honestly can measure, because the difference in a guy that's good versus bad under pressure is reflected in not only the winning, but the stats and the play. Like, it's the difference between an interception and a first down. It's the difference between a potential win and loss, being able to do that under pressure. Like, Matthew Stafford, we'll get to, was not good under pressure last year, and guess how their season ended? A pressure sack by Jalen Carter up the middle. That's how they lost. Who was one of the best quarterbacks under pressure? Lamar Jackson. Their season ended not because Lamar Jackson sucked under pressure, because Mark Andrews dropped a literal game-winning play. So I think the pressure stuff we can also kind of vary in terms of that. And just looking and watching, as someone who did watch all the games, you could just tell throughout the year there was improvement there too. But that's our Bryce Young stuff. We'll see who's maybe closer there. And even then, he went up 1 spot for you, and he went up 4 spots for me, which doesn't seem like a lot based on maybe what his rookie year was. But we were expecting some kind of projection, clearly, because he would not have been ranked, 26 for you last year and 22 for me last year, if we were just going based off his rookie year, because his rookie year was terrible. So we expected some progression, but I think it was maybe a little bit better, or not better, but just like different than what we thought, being terrible in the beginning and then coming back. But I do like the stuff you brought up with maybe what he changed there. I do just think, though, even if the situation is getting better, I guess, maybe you're right. We'll see what happens when it's a full year and you start the season like you did last year. I think he's going to pick up where he left off, but we'll see. And then to finish off what's on the screen here, we can go a little quicker. Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. You have him at 22. I'll spoil it. I have him at 16. He went down 11 spots for you, 9 spots for me. He was kind of hard to fit. I don't think we can get too crazy ranking him low, in my opinion. But what's your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers? You have him at 22, below Drake May, Tua, and Darnold, but ahead of Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I thought he was okay. Last year, I think the biggest thing was just his lack of movement was very apparent. I think he's still got a live arm, but under pressure, playing off script, which was his biggest thing in Green Bay when he was really good. We don't really see that much anymore. And so I think also just kind of the drama and other stuff that he brings, the distraction, like why isn't he signed yet with the Steelers? It's kind of just annoying. But I think he's kind of in that range. I kind of just found a spot where it was tough. I didn't want to have him too low, but I didn't want to have him too high. So I thought kind of 22, 21, just kind of in there was fine. I think he's a good quarterback, but not somebody that I would entrust to bring my team to the postseason at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming he's a Steeler.
Yeah.
It seems like what it's like there. But, I'm really not – when I look at it, I'm not really leaving this Jets season totally blaming Rodgers, which I know everyone loves to do. But, I mean, realistically, like, the weapons in totality were pretty below average, and the offensive line was, like, a little bit below average. Rodgers had the most drops in the NFL, if you didn't know, 39 drops. Second place was 28. He had 11 more drops than second place. So pretty absurd there, which could you blame him because half of those are the guys that are his friends? Maybe. Yeah, maybe he should just shut the hell up and play with who he's there with and not have Alan Lazard starting. But still had a lot of drops when you watched. And so I think objectively, just as a talent / quarterback, I got to take that into account. And, even with all that, he was like around average for starting quarterbacks last year, which is basically 16. That's what I'm viewing it, as average. So I think I can kind of easily have them around there because I think the Steelers situation is not that like far off from the Jets last year. The offensive line, like we already mentioned it with the swap with Justin Fields. I don't think the situation is that different. And it's just there's way more stability play calling wise. Like last year, Jets talent is probably similar, but coaching is way different. The Jets coaching last year was not as good. So if he goes to Steelers, it'll be much better. So I think we're a little too low, but I'm at 16 there. And then any more on this spot, you have Kyler Murray at 18, but we'll go ahead and get to him because I do have him a little bit higher. Now let's get into the bigger ones, 17 through 11. A lot of guys that you'll see on the board here. So I'll just go run them down, and then I'll mention some to talk about. At 17, or at previously 18, you had Kyler, but starting off now, 17, you have Trevor Lawrence. He goes down one spot from you last year. I have Dak Prescott, so I have Dak Prescott a little bit lower. You have Geno Smith at 16, like I mentioned. Aaron Rodgers for me at 16. At 15, you have Bo Nix, as we mentioned, much higher. I ended up having him at 21. 15 for me is Trevor Lawrence. So, definitely had to move him down a little bit there. Brock Purdy, we already talked about Brock Purdy. You had him a lot higher. We went over our stuff there. You had him at 14. I had him at 23. 14 for me is Jared Goff. I had Jared Goff at 14. You had at 13 Baker Mayfield. At 13 for me, I had Kyler Murray. And then I had Baker Mayfield at 12. And you had Jared Goff at 12. So very similar, kind of just going around here. And then 11, you had Jordan Love. And 11 for me, I had Geno Smith. So that's probably one of the bigger differences is Geno Smith versus for me versus you. But let's go ahead and I'll go based off my list and we'll start down here. Dak Prescott. I had him at 17. You had him at why you don't even have him showing yet. Okay, well, you have him inside the top 10, basically. Dak Prescott's a top 10 quarterback for you, not for me. This is one that we can go over. Him, I think we can go over Geno, Baker, Love, those kind of guys we can talk about quickly. But Dak Prescott we can touch on a little bit more just because there's such a discrepancy there. I had him dropping 4 spots from last year. You have him actually staying the exact same from where you had him ranked last year. And I just think it was a very stark difference between the past 2 years for Dak. So it's kind of hard to find out where he lands. But I think it's somewhere in the middle because last year he was just not good when he played, got injured. But 2 years ago, he was really good in the regular season. So I'm kind of putting him somewhere in the middle, and maybe 17 seems too low, but 2024 was really bad for Dak standards. It was on pace for one of his worst years, almost as bad as 2022, because if you don't remember, like the 2 of the past 3 years of Dak Prescott have been like, I don't know, slightly below average quarterback play, and then one that's like definitely above average. And so it was kind of like 2022 all over again, his most turnover-worthy plays yet. He was around like rookie year Caleb Williams and Drake May in terms of his offensive grades. That's kind of where we're sitting at there for last year. I just think he had so much. Now the reason I have him lower than I'm worried is because not Tua worried, but compared to Tua, I feel like he's better. But I just think he relied so much on CeeDee Lamb, like to the point where it was way too much, and the offensive line being worse really hurt him because he's literally always had a top-tier offensive line. But I do understand because he also didn't really have a real run game, so I think that needs to be taken into account as well. Like, it was CeeDee Lamb and F-all, to be honest. And in the offseason, they got George Pickens, which is a good upgrade. Maybe a personality problem, but a good upgrade. And the offensive line, though, it's like the same. I think you're just hoping for improvement, and then the running back room is not really that much better. I mean, you just got to hope Javonte Williams is what he was 3 years ago, but I don't know if that's going to happen. And they promoted the offensive coordinator of last year, Dak's one of his worst seasons, to head coach, which was one of the worst head coach signings in the entire NFL, probably the worst actually. And he's coming off season-ending surgery. All reports say that's going well, but I still think that's a factor. So, I don't expect another year like last year, but I don't expect another year like he had in 2023. So kind of how you brought up with Bryce Young, you think it's somewhere in the middle. I'm taking that into account for Dak Prescott. I think it's somewhere in the middle between the past 2 years that we've seen, because I don't think he's going to see a year like he did again with that, where the offensive line was all great. He had a good run game, had great defense. Receivers were there, and they were much better, and you felt good about who was calling plays with Kellen Moore and blah, blah, blah. Like, or I think it was Kellen Moore, but it was McCarthy that was there. But still, like, I think he's definitely a much better play caller than what they have now. But, even then, in the playoffs that year, he was like a 0. It was not good versus the Packers. So that kind of brings down my personal view of Dak Prescott in general. Even when he has a good season, it's a 0 in the playoffs, for at least compared to how good the season was. So that's kind of my thinkings of Dak, and I'm not even sure they're going to make the playoffs next year. So I think that kind of would bring down maybe the potential of him even getting to be a little higher. But yeah, I have him at 17, maybe a little low. But you have him inside the top 10. What's your kind of synopsis on him?
Tired of the Dakota Prescott disrespect. I think he's a heavily underrated regular season quarterback. I think the playoff concerns are definitely valid. But I think in 2023, he was an MVP candidate towards the end of the season, was really good that year. 36 touchdowns, 4,500 yards. I think last year, yeah, he wasn't great. Suffered an injury pretty early on that derailed his season. But the Cowboys may have had one of the worst situations for any quarterback in the league last year. I think that's fair to put out. They had CeeDee Lamb, and that was pretty much it for weapons on the outside. I mean, they had Jalen Tolbert. I don't think he's that good. I mean, they traded for your boy Jonathan Mingo, and I mean that's enough said there. And then running back, they had Rico Dowdle, who's kind of just a journeyman, and it just
Good
wasn't.
Panther.
It just wasn't great. So I think Dak is kind of a similar guy again, where um, you don't want him to be the guy that's carrying your team. And if you surround him with pretty good pieces, I would take him over all the other game managers in the league. Like I'd take him over Jared Goff, I'd take him over Purdy, I'd take him over Tua, just all those guys we've kind of mentioned that are kind of in that realm. I think Dak is like the maximum of that tier, if that makes sense. So I think when he's at his peak and he's playing and he's healthy, I think I could see him as a top 10 quarterback and then that kind of 8 to 12 range any given season. So I think in like 2023, I think it's fair to say he was maybe even higher than a top 8 quarterback that year. Obviously, last year wasn't as good, got hurt, and maybe the injury concern thing I should have taken into account a little bit more because he's like broken his leg now. He like ripped his hamstring off the bone. So who knows how that will impact him this upcoming season into the future. But I think now with CeeDee Lamb, you got George Pickens. They got Tyler Booker in the draft. Just some young pieces on their offensive line. I think it should be a lot better next year. And now you get him another weapon. I think Dak could again have a 30 touchdown season next year. I don't know how good the Cowboys will be as a team because I think there's still some holes on defense. I don't love Brian Schottenheimer as their head coach, although I think he's gotten to the point where he's a little underrated almost. Like I don't think he's like, oh my gosh, they hired Matt Eberflus. Like I think he's going to be better than like some of those guys. I think he'll just bring.
I think Matt Eberflus is better, but
well,
that's
okay. I don't. I disagree there.
let's say Freddie Kitchens. How about that?
I think
it's not like they hired Freddie Kitchens or anything.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I think he's going to be just a fine, good head coach. I mean, he's got experience with Dak now for some time, working under McCarthy. He's been around in a lot of different coaching staffs as well. I just think he's going to be fine, and we know the coach for the Cowboys is kind of just a puppet almost anyway. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm kind of bullish on Dak having a good season with George Pickens in the fold, and I just think as a regular season quarterback, he is pretty underrated at this point. I think he gets a lot bigger of a microscope because he's on the Dallas Cowboys. If he was on the Jacksonville Jaguars and he was putting up these numbers, I think he would be viewed a little bit differently.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think I just probably view all the stuff a little bit lower. And in terms of the game managing stuff, like I think if you just compare him to like Jared Goff, who's probably like second or whatever, kind of in that realm, I think in terms of pocket, I think Burrow's number one, which you probably just didn't really consider him.
I don't think he's
Burrow
a game
would
manager.
be number one there. No, you said game manager, not pocket. Sorry. I was just thinking about, but yeah,
Pocket
game
passer,
manager.
yeah.
I mean, the only one I have above that would just be Goff, but I think it's one or the other. And the reason for that, I think Dak probably has the best regular season between those two, but playoffs, I mean, we've seen better from Goff. It's not like when Goff was on the Rams, he was like when they went to the Super Bowl. I know the Super Bowl we view as terrible, which it was versus the Patriots, one of the best defenses. But going towards it, it's not like it was Jimmy Garoppolo level, 30 yards in a game when they win. That wasn't really happening. He was having good playoffs, and I think he did have a poor playoff game last year, obviously, but Dak Prescott had a poor playoff game in the game that they also – it's the same thing. They were both favorites, both had great regular seasons, both completely collapsed in the playoffs and got completely upset. And so, that's their last playoff game for each of them. Same thing. So I just prefer just the one or the other, but that's just a slight difference there. Next, let's go over Trevor Lawrence. So you have him 17. He falls one spot for you. I have him 15 because he falls 5 for me, because I did have him in the top 10, and to be honest, I even moved him up a little bit at the end here, and I was tempted to move him up even more because I'm just a sucker. But I guess I'll go into him because I had him lower last year. It was definitely the one I was the most wrong on, arguably. Again, I could double down, to be honest, because I think there's more validity to saying he could be much better this year than there was last year. And again, I still ended up moving him up last second. I moved him up ahead of Rodgers and Dak, but I think obviously this season was disappointing, but I think the situation was just pretty poor. This coaching specifically and play calling, 100%. This season was relatively similar to Rodgers. It was just, I think, a little bit better, but he also had less playing time. It's just the team's success was different. And again, I think this is a little bit more projecting. He could be lower like he was. And if he is again, then yeah, I think this year it's kind of all right, there's nothing I can really say. And I know I'm having him here after his worst year since his rookie season, but the pieces are there. And if you watch him, I really think that you could just see, okay, there's stuff there. And I think Liam Cohen is going to really help. And he's got year 2 Brian Thomas Jr. Travis Hunter is a total question mark. We have no idea how good he's going to be. I just think he's going to be good. He's going to impact the game and will be out offensively. That's the reason the Jaguars got him, because they were like, hey, you come here, we'll let you play whatever. Now, health and all that stuff, I understand that, but just looking up, we can't really predict that stuff. So, offensive line was an issue. It's improved next year. It's nothing crazy, but, it's definitely going to be better than last year. So, I think he has to be better. I understand that, and I think he will. It's just how good will he be? And I think he is definitely worse than I had thought he was going to be, so I can take the slight L on there. But I think somewhere around here is where he's going to be having a better year this next season. But they got to find some kind of way to unlock what was there that one year where they had an amazing comeback, and he in the second half was just awesome. And one of the best games from a quarterback in recent memory was the second half of Trevor Lawrence in that game. It was literally perfect. But then you got the first half, and I think that's a good representation of his career so far. You got second half of that game sometimes, but you've had more of showing of the first half of that Chargers playoff game than the second. So we'll see what happens there. But I still have him a little higher, but I had him at 17 to start, and I had him higher last year. But you were kind of on this similar range with Trevor. So maybe he's better next year, but you definitely had him the right amount last year for this upcoming season.
Yeah, you really hit on all the points. Like the situation a little bit more, like Liam Cohen. Think he's got a chance to develop him a lot, and if that happens, he could, jump into the top 12, top 10 quarterback range. I think he's got the talent to do that. I just want to wait and see for that to happen. I kind of said that last year. I want to wait and see before I give Trevor Lawrence props, and I'm still going to do that because we're in this will be year 5 this year. So
I think so.
Yeah, I just want to wait.
He's already paid, so
yep.
I think it's really unfortunate too. It's you still haven't had 2 years in a row of stuff, and he's already got the money. So that I don't really love that. Hey, as much as I said about Purdy, at least he's had 2 years in a row of not bad play. So that's that. But let's go ahead and go next here. Jared Goff, I have 14. You have 12. So you're a little bit higher. He does drop for both of us. He drops 4 spots for you, so you were high on him to begin with last year. He drops 2 spots for me. I'll have you start off with kind of a quick little Jared Goff stuff.
Yeah, I like golf a lot. I guess I'm a little bit higher on some of the game managers than kind of you are. I don't know. I guess
I guess,
I
yeah.
give him a little bit more grace. I think golf is we've seen him produce a lot in the Lions offense the last couple of years, which was, obviously one of the best situations in the league. I think the reason why I have him ahead of somebody like Purdy, I just like his arm talent a little bit more, and we've seen him be a little bit more consistent year in and year out, even if the situation hasn't been as great around him. I mean, there's a couple years where the Lions were kind of rebuilding, and I still think he had some pretty good performances in there. So I just think we've seen a little bit more from him in that way. But I just think in terms of, I wanted to see him because I guess we ranked kind of after like his NFC Championship game appearance, so there was probably a little bit of recency bias there, seeing him take the team that far. And then this year, I mean, he got him to the number 1 seed, but kind of melted down in the postseason game. Don't put it all on him because it was kind of like, all right, Goff, you got to score every possession of this game, or we're not going to win.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do that, but I think it's a good range for golf. I think 8 to 12 again. I think all these guys are kind of interchangeable for me. Just depends on how the season goes and what happens. But yeah, that's kind of my thought process, and just kind of a bad taste in my mouth with that playoff game.
Yeah, I think that's why I had him lower. Again, I think some people might be mad of like, why do you have Goff so much higher than Purdy when they're that similar? I think the two teams thing is a big deal, proving it that it's been done 2 separate times. Now, obviously, he's had great stuff each time, but I think he also has objectively done a better job of taking advantage of it than Brock Purdy has. Brock Purdy has never legitimately been in MVP conversations, and if anyone has done that, they're just absurd. Whereas Jared Goff, I think that has been the case at points, and I think it's been extended playoff runs, not just one. So that's why I have him there, but definitely lower than last year, but not by too much because I still wasn't as bullish as other people were. I didn't have him in the top 10 last year. He falls 2 spots for me to 14, so I didn't have him up there just because I understood the situation that was there. He had the second highest passer rating, but I don't think he was the second best quarterback. And again, you bring up the playoff game. Yeah, I mean, the defense sucked. He had to do a bunch of stuff, but there were still at least 3 plays that it's like, what the hell are you doing? And it was bad. So I'm not going to be like, oh, he wasn't that bad. Yeah, he was bad instead of horrible. So I think that's objectively, the case there. But I mean, he had the most yak yards per reception in the NFL. So yeah, definitely there. The lowest drop rate in the NFL. Graded much lower than guys around him with a similar passer rating, which is like the Lamar Jacksons, the Joe Burrows, the Baker Mayfields of last year, who was actually really good, which is why I have him higher. But I do think he's below other guys. Like you can see here, I have Kyler Murray actually ahead of him because I think the advanced stats, they do take into account the playoff game, and the playoff game just lowers Goff a ton. And I think I guess we can touch on it a little more than I initially had. I still think, you could say, okay, hey, don't score every point or whatever. But the problem with the Lions was the defense was so injured. It's not like the offense was completely busted. And you can lose the game and still be like, wow, well, we just didn't score enough. But realistically, the defense wasn't that good. That wasn't the case. He threw 3 or 4 interceptions. Again, watching it, had some really bad throws. Offensive line was pretty healthy. They had the running backs there. They had Amon-Ra there, Laporta there. So all the stuff was there, and it was just real bad. It was kind of a shocking, poor performance, just like Dak Prescott's playoff game against the Packers 2 years ago. It was shocking how much of a blowout and bad that was, which is why, again, I have them lower. But I think that's kind of why I have Jared Goff a little bit lower, and I do understand the great stuff he's had. It's just, again, compared to Purdy, I think he's, already mentioned the stuff there. But Goff could have lost that playoff game, and I would still obviously rank him higher. It's not because they lost; it's how they lost. And I don't want to rank him too high based on his regular season success because I think there was a lot of stuff that played into that as well, objectively. And with Goff, we've seen when that's not the case where he is as a quarterback. So he's obviously more dependent on his stuff than a lot of people, but I agree when he has the good stuff, he takes advantage of it to the highest degree possible for game managers. And I do think it is a little better than Dak Prescott. But that's why I have him there. And then 13 for me is actually Kyler Murray, and you have him at 18. And Kyler Murray, he's up 3 for me. He's actually down 1 for you, which is kind of surprising. I think he's a quarterback that is not being talked about enough. I think he's having a good, steady climb to getting back to where he was. I think the question is just how close is he going to get to where he was at a point where before the injury, he was in MVP conversation. He was top 2 in MVP before he got injured, but it was like, 2-3 years ago, and then he had those big injuries, and that derailed it. But I think this is the first time where we're going into an offseason since then where with Kyler Murray, where we're like, okay, like we can see it. We can see him coming back. It's just how quote-unquote back is he? Like what level of degree of good are we going to see? And I think last year was solid for Kyler. I think he had a mix of great plays that only he can do. I mean, I just think of the Raiders game, like insane plays that he had there. But there were definitely some passing slip-ups. I think his situation isn't bad, and it seems to be probably improving just based on progression of Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey Benson was a running back, and he's actually going to play now. McBride is not having 0 touchdowns again. Like, that's just not happening. So the overall situation is just good in general. Like, I think the offensive coaching is just good. The situation is good. Offensive line is better than people think, and it's probably average. And even then, it's not like he needs an amazing offensive line. So I think the big question is, can Kyler get back to what he was in 2021 in terms of his passing? Because currently, I think he's shown that he's healthy from like the way he ran. Like, he was a good runner last year. It's just the passing, it was there in 2021. So you just have to have next year, all right, I'm fully healthy, I'm back. Can I combine those two to get and put it all together? We'll just see how that goes. Obviously, I'm not saying he's going to do that, because if that was the case, I'd have him much higher. But I think he's being a little underrated. So I have him at 13. You have him at 18. What's your take on Kyler Murray?
Yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of him. I think any given week with his talent, he can be one of those quarterbacks that can go head to head against anybody. But I just think there's also times when he looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I remember vividly watching one game. It was the Cardinals at Seattle, and I put a huge wager on the Seahawks to win that game. It was really big to take like the lead and I think the division at the time. And Kyler was just terrible that day. He kind of single-handedly.
Oh, he blew your bet, so he's got to go down a spot.
Well, no, I took Seattle. I took him to lose. So
you took Seattle.
He helped my bet. But
oh,
yeah. I'm just saying. I just remember that game because I was really locked in for like every snap for that game, and I'm using that as an example of just like any given week you don't know what Kyler you're gonna get. I think there's even one game against the Packers I remember where he was really horrible. They got destroyed by Green Bay. So I just don't really like quarterbacks like that when one week you can be really good and then one week you can be really bad. And I think consistency matters a lot when you're kind of grading these quarterbacks and how good they'll be. And I'm just not really a big fan of quarterbacks that are super inconsistent. And on a game-to-game basis, that's Kyler Murray. But even on a down-to-down basis, that's him because you can't really see over the offensive line that well. He's not great of just, again, staying in the confines of the offense, going through his reads, finding open players. He's at his best when he can play backyard football. And I kind of want somebody that can play in the pocket and then, also play off script. And those are some of the best quarterbacks in the league, obviously, that we'll get to. But I'm just not as big on Kyler. I don't know. I see the highs, but I just see the lows. And so for me, I kind of have him in that middle tier range. And yeah, that's why I kind of got him at 18.
We definitely have our preferences of quarterbacks. I think that reflect in the rankings here. You like your more pocket guys. I kind of like a little more dynamic guys. And I think some are good, some are bad. So that's kind of interesting there. But let's go ahead and finish up so we can get to the top 10 because both these guys are in this range. And it's Baker, I have at 12, who goes up 8 spots for me. You have him at 13. He goes up 5 for you. And then I have Geno Smith just outside the top 10. He goes up 6 spots for me. He goes up 4 for you. I'll just talk about both, and then you can kind of just relay what you would like off each one. For Baker at 12, I mean, it was a real roller coaster year for sure. But one, not roller coaster year, roller coaster career, like for Baker, like in terms of just what has happened in his career. But it seems like he's really found a home here. And he definitely proved me wrong last year of where I actually had him and where I thought this team was going to be. But it was a great year. Like, he was a 100% for sure Pro Bowler, not some petty Pro Bowler. Like, he was for sure one. Another playoff appearance. They didn't win, but it was really close, and he did not play bad in the playoff game, and it was against a team that went to the NFC title game. 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, 106 passer rating. He was probably like the 5th best quarterback last year, arguably, maybe 6. Now, the hard part is to place him because, you know, I've seen some very kind of varied placements, but I do kind of like this spot here. I think the most similar guy to him is honestly Geno Smith, who I do have above him. And with those two, I think Geno has just he's had more consistent seasons when he's had his, you know, quote unquote comeback than Baker has. I think Baker has had higher highs but lower lows, even in Tampa Bay itself. But you know, I think the biggest difference is Seattle has had one of the worst O-lines for 3 years in a row, where Tampa for 2 years in a row has had a top 3 offensive line. And, you know, weapons might be similar, but I think the offensive line is definitely a pretty big deal there. And I don't think the difference in the offensive line, or I don't think the difference in Baker's play was enough to make up for, okay, objectively one is a much better O-line situation than the other, and they're not that far off talent-wise, at least in my opinion. And I think one guy is, the play caller might be solid in Seattle that he's had for 2 years offensively, but the other guy has had 2 guys literally get a head coaching job. Like Dave Canales and Liam Cohen literally went to go be head coaches. So I think another thing for me is the fumbles. Like, people don't realize Baker had the most fumbles in the NFL, 14. That's definitely a problem, and I think that needs to be taken into account as just a pure player. And he also had a lot of benefits of dominating versus lower defenses for his stats. He had 13 touchdowns versus the 3 worst defenses. Now, I'm not trying to say, I know there's a thing of like, okay, well, obviously he's doing what he's supposed to do against the defenses. Yes, that's true, and I'm not knocking him for that. I'm just saying I don't want to raise him too high because we have to look at where these touchdowns came from. And it was Carolina who was the worst, and then a ton of others were 3 of the 5, other worst defenses. But he struggled versus other defenses. Like, they played Carolina twice. He was really good against Carolina one, and he was terrible against Carolina another game. And then the other defenses like the 49ers, Denver, Detroit, he was not good. So I do want to bring up, like, anytime there was a real good defense, he was not as good. But I do think he's, most likely, he has the potential to pass people that are above him. Like, I could see him being a top 10 quarterback next year if he has a similar year. I think you objectively have to do that because there's guys above him that we are slightly projecting based on how good we actually think they are. If Baker Mayfield has another similar year, I think he is definitely most likely to be up there. And then for Geno Smith, I'm at 11. And I think he's one of the most underrated and consistently good quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. And I think it's a great comeback story that we've seen a little bit before, like Sam Darnold last year, Ryan Tannehill, but it was a very short comeback because it was only, one season. Nick Foles, Case Keenum, very limited success. But I think Geno Smith has done something great in that he's actually had sustained success over multiple years like Baker, but he's gotten better every single year, and it hasn't been giant fall-offs or anything in between. He's been in the top 10 in terms of his passing grade for 2 years in a row. He's been top 13 in all 3 years in Seattle. He graded as one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL over the past 3 years. This past year, he had a bottom 5 offensive line, and the other guys to have any success with offensive lines this bad were Joe Burrow and Matthew Stafford. That's it. And while Geno is definitely lower in those guys, I think he's in that realm of the Matthew Stafford. That's why I have him at 11. He was top 5 in completion percentage. He's the only quarterback that was better in terms of his average depth of target, meaning it wasn't just dump offs to get a high completion percentage. Like, he was even better going down the field. His big time throws, turnover worthy plays were basically just a little bit less than Joe Burrow. According to Pro Football Reference advanced stats, Geno Smith was number 1 last year. Yes, number 1 in both on target throws and having the lowest percentage of bad throws. Number 1 in both last year. He's improved under pressure as well each year over the past 3 years with the bad offensive line. He's improved under pressure every year to where he's top 10 now under pressure. And now, while he's had a really good wide receiving core, I think the lack of offensive line puts a limit onto his offensive potential. And I would rank him 9th. It's just, I would have liked to see more playoff stuff, and it's hard for me to do that when I haven't seen that. And that's probably your main argument. And now that they go to the Raiders, the past 2 years, like, they've just barely been out of the playoffs with their division being crazy. And he's had one wild card game with Seattle. They've been very close both times, but the wild card game, the defense gave up 41 points, and he wasn't bad, but he was just not like crazy good or anything. He was solid, but the defense gave up 41 points in the one wild card game they played versus the Niners. So hard to really succeed there. But now he goes to the Raiders, which is the hardest division maybe, but a better offensive line, more stable run game, but probably worse receiving core. So it's hard to really pinpoint how good he's going to be. But I really just wanted to give him his props. He's also going to be 35 years old, so maybe there's a downtick there. But I wanted to give him his respect from the stuff that I feel like anytime I turn on a Seattle game, I'm like, yeah, that was this is a good game from him. There was a good throw. There was a good this, that. Like, I feel like we're not talking about that enough of Geno. So a lot there, but what's your stuff on Geno and Baker? Baker, you have 13, and Geno, you have 16.
Yeah, Baker, I'm a really big fan of. I was really impressed last season. Having over 40 touchdowns is just ridiculous for one season. I think his situation Tampa Bay was also really good. I'll be interested to see how he does with another offensive coordinator this year, his third in 3 years. I think he's probably got like a record. I think there's like a stat. He's got like 8 or 9
Probably.
plus offensive coordinators, something crazy like that. But yeah, I'm a big Baker fan. I think he was really good. Has kind of come around and proven that he can be even a franchise quarterback. And if you look at his contract and you kind of take that even into consideration, I'd much rather have Baker on his deal than some of these other quarterbacks making $50-60 million. So
For sure.
yeah, I like Baker a lot. Geno Smith, a little bit different for me. It's kind of funny, like as you said, you turn on a Seattle game and you kind of like what you see. I feel like anytime I turn on a Seattle game and I watch Geno play, I'm like, I don't like what I'm seeing. Maybe that's just kind of the games that the select few that I'd be locking in and watching every snap of. But I don't know. I'll be interested to see how he does in Las Vegas. I think in Seattle, he was a good quarterback, but I didn't think he was really anything special. I didn't think he was gonna like have Seattle kind of like winning a playoff game. Like I don't think he's a playoff winning caliber quarterback. And I think kind of those in my top 12 to 13 range. It's kind of where I have those kind of guys, and I just don't think Geno can do that. Maybe that's unfair, maybe it's not, but I don't really view him in that lens. I think he's just a solid starting quarterback, and that's kind of where I have him. I think if he goes to Las Vegas and again, maybe he gets them to 9 wins or something like that, or has them in the mix, maybe my opinion will change. But for now, I just kind of view him as a middling quarterback who he can keep you competitive, but that's probably all he's going to do. And yeah, I'll be interested to see what he does this year for Vegas, but that's kind of what my thought process is for both of those guys.
Yeah, and I have him at 11, you have him at 16. I think he's the definition of a good quarterback, and I think, in my opinion, if he was on the 49ers, they would have got a Super Bowl. Hot take, that's my opinion. I think if he was on the 49ers, they win a Super Bowl, and they're not losing. But I'm not even going to give you a chance to respond to that. We're just going to go. So we'll go to the top 10. For our top 10s, I'll go 10 through 6. For Mathis, number 10 is Jalen Hurts. My number 10 is going to be C.J. Stroud. Your number 9 is Dak Prescott, as we mentioned. My number 9 is Jordan Love. You had Jordan Love at 11, so we'll mention Jordan Love next. Your number 8 is C.J. Stroud. Mine is Jalen Hurts. For number 7, you have Matthew Stafford. I also have Matthew Stafford. And for 6, you have Jaden Daniels, but I have Justin Herbert. So I think you can tell where each thing is flipped here. We have been going on for a while, so I have a lot of notes here, but I don't want to kind of go on too much. I think the biggest ones I do want to talk about are a few of these, to be honest, a few of these guys here. But I think for right now, Hurts, Love, and Stroud are the biggest ones because it's not like they were as streamlined as, I don't know. We know Stafford's good. Like, do you have anything that you really want to extend on Stafford? Like, I think last year, the regular season was not as good as people really remember. Like, he was 31st in objective adjusted completion percentage. The regular season was not great. It was a 50-point difference in his passer rating when he's under pressure. So, like I mentioned, under pressure, definitely a gigantic deal. But also, he's objectively, like, they were literally one play away from maybe being in the NFC title game, and then we have no idea what happens after that. But potential stuff that happens there. But I think maybe better offensive line injury luck. He still is one of the best coaches, and he's probably still top 10, and I have no problem keeping him there. So, yeah, I mean, do you have anything on Stafford
No,
you want to mention? We both have him at 7.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. Keep an eye on his play. See if it dips again and he has another down year in the regular season.
I think he's the most likely to fall out of the top 10 next year.
I agree.
I think he's the most likely. But let's go ahead. Mine is Stroud, Love, Hurts, 10, 9, 8. You have Stroud. Yours is Love, Hurts, Stroud. So let's go over CJ Stroud first. Highest on yours, lowest on mine, but I have him 10. You have him 8. He goes up 1 spot for me, down 1 spot for you. So we're slowly meeting in the middle of where we were kind of differing last year, where I was a little more cautious. You were a little more optimistic. I've had my takes with CJ. I think it's ironic. I actually view him, again, in a higher light this year, and the stats were worse. But I think the advanced stuff and just watching definitely proves this is probably a more realistic ranking, and I think we're both kind of coming to that. Maybe in reality he's 9. I don't know, but we've had him around the same stuff. CJ did not have this big year 2 explosion that people expected. Literally was bet on to be MVP. I did not really agree with those bets at all. That was definitely not the case. But I think obviously the big stuff you have to take into account is, the injury stuff that had gone on. But I also think part of it is, quite frankly, my points from last year where he kind of just got lucky in scenarios. And I think that was objectively true. Like, he just did not get as lucky in his interceptions not falling his way like they did his rookie year. And trust me, I lost a lot of CJ Stroud because I was crying because Bryce Young sucked and CJ Stroud was really good. A lot of stuff, he was better for sure. And again, I have CJ Stroud 8 spots higher than Bryce Young. But a lot of stuff was kind of like, all right, I don't know if we might be going a little too far with this kind of stuff because this objectively could have happened and fallen this way or whatever. He had the exact same big-time throw and turnover-worthy play percentage as last year. The exact same. Very similar in terms of his on-target and bad throw percentage from last year. Almost the exact same completion percentage with actually less drops this year. And you can see this kind of stuff reflected in his normal stats. Like, he had a good amount of less touchdowns, a couple less touchdowns, definitely a good amount of, more interceptions. But again, with his rookie year, I think a lot of the baseline stats he had were just not sustainable. And I think it's partly why passer rating is a good initial look of performance, but not the end all be all whatsoever. Because you have stuff like this. I think his very similar advanced stats from both seasons, I think, point to kind of how much better I think he is potentially going to be, which I don't think was much, which I think that was the case when he was coming out. I didn't think he was going to get too much better coming out anyways, and he was just much better than a lot of people thought. I think he objectively also was one of the most pressured quarterbacks last year, and he did improve his ability to throw under pressure, and he improved his fumble percentage, so I think that's a big deal. But regular season, not as good. You have injuries, which I do actively understand with the receiving core and everything. But in terms of the totality of the team, the offensive line and the running game was much better than his rookie year. So you kind of have give and take there a little bit. But in terms of how it went after that, you get to the playoffs, and that's why he goes up in my rankings. He was good in that playoff game. Now, to be honest, he was actually good in the Kansas City game. If you don't remember, the Chargers game, he was not that good. He really wasn't. If you watched it, he was not playing that well. It was the Chargers blew it. The Kansas City game, they totally could have won that game, 100%. I could have seen it happening because he played really well there at Kansas City, by the way. So I think playing that well on the road after his rookie year, he played really bad on the road versus the Ravens. I think that's a pretty big deal for me and why I have him so much higher. But now, they come in, they addressed a lot of stuff offensively because of the health concerns of both Tank Dell and Nico Collins, which Nico Collins I think is fine, but Tank Dell I don't think is. So they drafted 2 receivers, both of Ohio State, both I really like, got a better O-line. It's not as good, to be honest. They got O-line in the draft. I mean, I don't think they're going to have as good of an O-line. I don't know how much worse it's going to be because they obviously traded Laremy Tunsil. They have a new OC, former Rams OC, and Nick Caley, so that's a big question mark. We'll see how he does there. But I think you should see the paper stats increase for CJ next year. But I think objectively as a QB, he's going to be around the same. But that's good. A top 10 quarterback. I think he's around 11 to 9. That's kind of my opinion. You have him at 8. What say you for CJ Stroud?
Yeah, I think 8 to 12 range. That's what I said last year, and I think that's kind of just where he's going to be in his career, just kind of the 8 to 12 range. I don't think he'll ever jump up to being like a top 5 guy. I don't think he'll ever kind of fall below that 12ish range. So I think you're right there with the range. I think last year again he showcased some things. Definitely wasn't as consistent and had a little bit more negative plays as you kind of mentioned. I think the injury part was a big piece of it. Tank Dell leaving, the offensive line was dreadful, and I think even their offensive coordinator who they let go, he's actually the Dolphins now is like an assistant. But
Really?
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
But he gets a lot of hate and criticism from Texans fans and fans across the league, which I mean that's kind of normal. I mean, if your offense isn't doing good or your quarterback's not playing good, you always kind of look for a scapegoat. So we'll see how big of an impact getting a new OC is, and if Stroud can kind of get some of that magic back from year one. But I agree with just a little bit more variance this past year. I think it kind of depends. Will the Texans see a wide receiver too that they drafted kind of arise? And if they get that, I think he could have a better year statistically, as you said. But I still always kind of see him in this 8 to 12 range, which is still really really good compared to the rest of the league.
Jordan Love, I have 9. You have 11. I guess maybe I shouldn't say it that way. You have 11, I have 9. That's probably a better way to say that. Not exactly the follow-up year I think fans expected, but I think it's probably, I don't know. I think that's probably not really the norm for Jordan Love. I still view him pretty highly. I think him and CJ are very similar, and they should be very similar in rankings, in my opinion. I think, again, situation was a bit worse. Year was a bit worse. I think the offensive line and run game, again, was definitely better. It's just the wide receivers are just really mid, like lower mid, and he's just such a gunslinger that it's really hard to really succeed like that. The year was obviously he wasn't a top 9 quarterback last year, obviously, but that's the thing with these. They're very fluid, and I think it's based on what we view the player as. And I mean, like Mahomes was not a top 4 quarterback this year, but we know he's going to be ranked in the top 4 at the very least in these rankings. But he was not playing like that last year. That was just not the case. So again, it's not just the end all be all with that kind of stuff, but they did address receiver. It's deeper now. Just, I don't know how much better it is. And you obviously have the injuries to Watson and stuff. But compared to CJ, I think CJ, in terms of like stuff, I think he does have the overall edge with like playoff performances. But Houston's defense was for sure much better, and they obviously played different teams in the games that they've played, playoff-wise. But I think that this year for Love, it was pretty close to CJ. Last year, Love was much better. Obviously the Cowboys stuff they had, but then he lost to the Niners the next round. Maybe this is on the higher end of where he actually is, but I think he has the potential to be even higher given what he's succeeded with, and that's why I think he's better, because I think we viewed him in a similar way to CJ, but I think he's had worse stuff, but he does have better coaching. So it's kind of give and take there. So if you have him lower, that's fine. I just think his ceiling's a little bit higher, and that's why I view him a little, better as a pure player. Because last year, I don't even think the team should have made the playoffs, and they still did, just with how poor the situation was. But I think, if you're Stroud ahead of him, that's fine, because I think Stroud might have a better year next year. It's just I don't know if it's going to be so much better compared to Love, and CJ is definitely going to have a much better situation than Jordan Love. So
I mean, I like Love a lot as
yeah.
a player. He kind of reminds me of like a super Walmart version of like Brett Favre, just kind of his play style, where
Yeah,
he's
for sure.
just throwing the ball all over the field all the time. He's taking risk, and I think on a year-to-year basis, we're going to see kind of the ebbs and flows of that. Where last year we saw a lot of the turnovers and just careless mistakes. Maybe next year that's different, and we see less of those, and it's more a higher reward. It's just when you kind of have that play style, get a lot of variance, but there's no doubting the talent that he has with his size, his arm, his mobility. I'm a big fan of Jordan Love, and I think I think this is a fair range, 8 to 12, and maybe on a given year, if some of that uh, gunslinging mentality kind of goes the right way versus the wrong way, maybe you can have a even better season than maybe like the eighth best quarterback in the league. But yeah, I think this is a good range for him.
Yeah, and then let's go to Jalen Hurts. This is a very long video. It's hard for me to even cut it down. It's annoying, but whatever. We just have so much good stuff to talk about because there's a lot to say for each quarterback that's up here. But Jalen Hurts, unfortunately, is just going to be one that might require a little more because there's so much to the Jalen Hurts story. I have him at 8. You have him at 10. So I was wondering where you would have him. And honestly, the more I dive in, the more I'm like, I really want to lower him. I really do. I really do. He's up 3 spots in your rankings. He actually stays the same for me. So I think I was a little bit better on the Hurts projection wagon of how he actually is. But even then, I'm sitting that and saying, I don't know how high I really want him. This is definitely one of the hardest ones to rank because the narrative on Hurts flipped so quickly, like insanely quickly. It's to where it's almost like I think Jalen Hurts is like the perfect definition of how I define like the casual but heavily engaged football fan and what they think. Because I've seen top 5 like a ton, just a ton. And, even then I've seen some people have him around where I had him, and I didn't think I would have him in this range either, but I still do because it's hard to not put him down. But I think this is the absolute peak. I don't think he's ever going to be higher than what he is right now in terms of rankings. And I'm serious. Because we have to look at what he objectively is. And I think this is just my opinion, I think we put a little bit too much emphasis on Super Bowl stuff. I think we do. They're obviously the biggest thing, but they all have context. You need context to each Super Bowl, and this one needs more than some others, in my opinion. I know it seems backwards that we put too much emphasis on the thing that matters the most, but I do think that's the case. I think a Super Bowl in football is unlike any other sport because it's so team-centric, and yet I know this is the position that's magnifying the most and does have the biggest impact, but I think we bring it to a point where it's way too much. I think like Purdy is a perfect example. Like people just placing him high and not really looking at it objectively with his situation and just seeing what, it made a Super Bowl and blah, blah, blah. Like that's kind of what I think. But I also had Jalen Hurts much higher than him last year because, again, he did not move in my rankings. PFF had Jalen Hurts passing grade as 30th in the regular season, and he was 21st in just a total offensive player in the regular season, including rushing, by the way. That's what that includes. If you take his offensive passing grade for the first 2 games of the playoffs, Green Bay and the Rams, and compare it to regular season quarterbacks, could you guess who it would be in between? If you took how he played passing-wise in the first 2 playoff games, Green Bay and the Rams, and correlated it to very similar guys in the regular season, who would you guess it would be in between?
Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields.
It is Aiden O'Connell and Will Levis.
Yeah, I was close.
Close, but bad, right? Like, that's not good. Those are the first 2 playoff games. And, I mean, the Rams, like, that, he did not win them that game at all. Like, go watch the Rams game, please. I implore you to go do that. He graded as, also just back to total stuff, he graded as the worst quarterback passing under pressure. The worst. I'm not kidding. And if you watched him during the regular season, especially during the Rams game, that checks out. But obviously, the biggest deal with him is the rushing, and I think that's the biggest thing. But if we look at the tush push, like 75, and this is true because I went and checked, 70 to 75% of his rushing touchdowns are tush push. I'm serious. 1 to 2 yard, 1 yard tush push, 75% of them, and he had 19 total touchdowns, I think. And the fact of having one of the best O-lines, the best halfback in the NFL, 2 great wide receivers, a proven and good play caller that just got a head coaching job, those are all the biggest reasons for success. And he still was not that good during the regular season and during the 2 playoff games. Well, then why do I have him ranked 10th or 8th or 10th like we each do? Well, he did have one of the highest adjusted completion percentage, and his average depth of target was not low at all. So it's not like he was just throwing dump offs the whole time. He was in the top 10 for both on-target throws and in the bottom 10 for bad throws, meaning that he did not have a lot of those. And I think we objectively know what he is as a runner. But if it was like, I think just with the tush push stuff, I think, could a guy like Kirk Cousins be getting all these touchdowns with the tush pushes? Maybe. I don't know. But I think objectively we have to look like, okay, no one else seemingly is doing that. I don't know. So do we give him all this credit? Do we not? I really don't know. That's kind of just subjective for you guys. I'm kind of in the middle. But he is obviously viable as a runner. He had 800 rushing yards. But the biggest thing for me is he was really good in the back half of the playoffs, to the point where I think he proved, even if the games were close, which they weren't at all, the Chiefs game and the Commanders game, they weren't at all. But it's different because even if they were close, he looked like he was capable of going head-to-head. He just did. And that's also been the case where he did go head-to-head in the Chiefs Super Bowl the first time, and he was really good. It's just they lost because he, objectively, like, the biggest play, the reason they lost is because they had a missed snap, and it was a fumble, and it was got back for a touchdown, and that was the biggest thing. But it wasn't directly his fault, But that's the biggest thing for me. Like, I feel like I personally think I put him a little too high, to be honest. But it's hard to put someone else above him and justify it based on how the stuff went, because he looked like he could go head-to-head if the Chiefs game or the Commanders game was close. But he also had times where it's like, oh my God, he's terrible, and he has the best O-line, the best running back, and blah, blah, blah. And easily could have lost the Rams game if it wasn't snowing. If the Rams-Eagles game was not snowing or played in a different environment, the Rams were winning. They just were. So that's the whole Jalen Hurts synopsis. But even then, I still have him at 8 because it's so hard. But I think he's for sure a tier below whatever the next guy above him is, which is Stafford for me. What's your stuff on
I'm pretty simple on Hurts. I think you can just sum it up as I think he's a limited quarterback in a really good situation, but he provides certain things to that situation which elevates him ahead of other limited quarterbacks. He had a great deep ball, and he happens to have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, 2 great deep threat receivers. The philosophy of what the Eagles is the run game. Great O-line, great running back. What does Hurts do better than most quarterbacks in the league? Run the football. So I think when you combine all those things, I think it's fair to call him a top 10 to 12 quarterback. I don't believe in the hype of having him, like in the top 5 or even kind of close to that range. I think the other big thing is he shows up in the biggest games and moments, which is another good thing you can add for him. Both the Super Bowls he's played in, outplayed Mahomes objectively in both of them. So that's another fair point to say. I think even the tush push argument, kind of a cheesy play, but I think we see quarterbacks all across the league try it. I mean, Josh Allen tried it, and he's got a pretty good O-line in Buffalo, and they can't run it as good as Hurts. So I think he deserves a little bit of credit for that. But we'll see. I'm sure the tush push will be banned in the next couple of years. It seems like it's trending that direction. So probably one more year of the tush push, and I'm sure he'll probably put up 15, 18 touchdowns again. But that's what I would say with him. Limited quarterback. He shows up in the biggest games, and he fits exactly what the Eagles want in a quarterback. Throwing the ball down the field and tush pushing and running, and it just kind of all fits, which has him in this range.
Yeah, just really hard to place. But I can't deny, they got the ring and all that. I'm kind of, I guess, in the middle of putting the emphasis on it. But it's not like he played bad and then they got the ring. That wasn't the case. So, hard to rank there, but that's where he is. And then let's just go ahead and finish off. I'll jump to the just top 5 here, because our 6 and 5 are just flipped.
Mm-hmm.
You actually have Jaden Daniels 6, Herbert 5. I have Herbert 6 and Daniels 5, which you probably thought I would be also having Herbert above Jaden Daniels. But I think that kind of has to be. I feel like this top 5 is pretty simple. 5 is either Herbert or Daniels, and then 4 through 1 is Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Lamar. Or like not in that specific order, but in whatever those guys there.
Yep.
So for Herbert and Daniels, I have Daniels above Herbert. Herbert goes down 1 spot for me. He goes up 1 spot for you, ironically. And then Jaden Daniels goes up 27 spots for me and 21 for you, which obviously we were projecting, but it was so much better than we thought, and you had him higher than I did. But I am honestly fully buying in to the Jaden Daniels hype. Like, I'm fully buying in. I think it seems like you are too, and I think other people should be as well. And again, I was a bit doubtful coming in to the season with him because of his limited years of production, his slender size, his slightly smaller arm, but it was literally the actual perfect scenario for him, and it couldn't have been better, literally at all. I think even then last year, it's not like I was like, oh my God, I'm going to die on this hill. He's not going to be as good. Like, no, it was just, hey, I don't really know what the situation is going to look like. And it was so much better than we thought. Like, he was a clear top 5 quarterback last year. He was second in total rushing yards by quarterbacks. He only had less first downs than Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts obviously had the tush push with all the first downs. That was that. But I think the biggest thing for me watching him and just the way the offense was, anytime I watched, I thought, like, there were just so many times where I'm like, how the hell do you stop that? I feel like I just thought that so many times where they were able to run whatever they wanted on 3rd down because of how much they believed and trusted their play calling and Jaden's talent to just get the 4th down. Like, they could just run whatever they want on 3 given plays, which I think is a massive advantage because obviously you saw how many times they went for it on 4th down, but we could kill them because it was objectively pretty effective. And you could also tell halfway through the year, like, he was starting to slide and go out of bounds a bit more, which was a big concern coming into the league. He would take a lot of hits in college and was not built to do that at all. For a rookie, even just objectively as a running quarterback, I think he did a great job of taking care of the ball. Only 4 fumbles. Only Lamar had a better turnover-worthy play percentage in terms of not turning the ball over. Only Lamar was better there. He was ranked 7th under pressure as a rookie quarterback. So that's a big deal. And I think he can still improve in areas. He can still improve in areas at least a little bit by taking more chances as he develops as a passer, even though he was just older coming out. And in the playoffs, he wasn't like crazy good or anything. I think we get a little sidetracked there. He wasn't insane, but he was not bad. Like, he was solid to good in all the playoff games. But I think it's true he needed some luck and to get to the NFC title game. Like, Tampa Bay had the ball in the 4th quarter with I think 10 minutes left or so, and they run a jet sweep, and it goes right through McMillan's hands in their own 20, and they fumble, and Washington, it leads to a touchdown on 4th down, and then they win off of a doink field goal against them, and then they play the Lions, who had no D-line and had a Jared Goff 4 interception game. But he's the closest thing to Lamar Jackson. And he just had one of the best rookie seasons of all time, and they just got better as a team. Deebo Samuel, Larry Tunsil, another year. Like, I don't really see a sophomore slump. I really don't. And I think he could still have more improvement to come, and I think if you were to do tiers, he's not in the same tier as these guys yet, but he's probably like a tier 1.5 or 2 or something like that. Because I think he's close. And then Justin Herbert, I lowered him because of the playoffs. That's basically it. I'm not going to overreact. I understand if people have him lower because of the playoff stuff and not having a playoff win yet. But again, I think we just got to look at it objectively and what the scenario has been. Herbert's regular season was really good and really efficient. The stats were lower. He only had 23 regular season touchdowns, but only 3 interceptions. And obviously it's because of how the offense kind of was this year. It was actually his highest yards per attempt and big time throw percentage of his career. And the weapons they had were definitely on the lower end. Like Ladd was really the only good one, and even then, he only played 65% of snaps because he was heavily in the slot. And the running game didn't have a lot of talent, to be honest, and that showed in the playoff game for sure. The running game was horrendous in the playoffs against the Texans, but he also was not good. Like he had 4 interceptions, so his whole offense sucked, but he sucked. So that's kind of hard to put there, but I don't think we can forget what he's had with Brandon Staley and them not addressing the offensive line until recently because Rashawn Slater had a whole year where he wasn't playing, and then they get Joe Alt now. But they added to the offensive line. The running back room is much better. The wide receiver room is still young, but it's not bad. But everything else looks so much better. I think the regular season is going to be similar. The only question is playoffs. And if we have more playoff slips, I'm okay moving him down.
Yeah, you really covered every base with both those guys. I think I don't really have much to add. I think Daniels best rookie season I've ever seen with my own eyes for a rookie quarterback. I think I'm going to buy all his stock again until he gives me a reason not to. The reason why I had Herbert just one spot ahead, I didn't want to go all in. Like I didn't want to push all my chips in the middle of the table because I feel like I did that to an extent last year with C.J. Stroud, and he didn't quite live up to the second year hype. And just in case that happens with Daniels and he's not as effective as he was as a rookie, I didn't want to have him quite inside the top 5 yet, but I mean still number 6. I mean he's right there. But Herbert, I just seen multiple years of him putting together. I think he's entering year number 6 this upcoming year, so a lot of really good seasons from him. I agree on the playoff performance. We got to see that more if he wants to stay in that range. But I think we will. I just believe in Jim Harbaugh. I believe in the foundation of the team that they're building. But yeah, I don't mind having them flip flopped at all because Daniels, he's done something that Herbert hasn't done. He's won 2 playoff games. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, he's in the NFC. So I think quarterback-wise, at least when you look at that, it's definitely harder. But, you're right. And I think the conversation might be a little more, I don't know, meaningful or intense if next year there's the same thing, I mean, I think we both might, and I loved Herbert, I think we both, I mean, you've come around obviously, but I think we both might lower him if there's a similar season next year, it'd be like, okay, what the hell? Like you can't do it in the playoffs, it's an issue, but, those guys flipped. And then 1 through 4, we actually have almost the same. It's just one guy or 2 guys are just flipped. Number 4, we both have Joe Burrow. Number 3, I have Allen and Lamar at 2. You have Lamar at 3 and Allen at 2, and both still have Mahomes at 1. These are pretty obvious, no question. I think we can just kind of talk about them just collectively to finish off. Burrow, I think, is one that, again, to be clear, I think you would agree. I could see there's clearly a tier gap. These are the best 4, and there's a gap. Like between, I think any of these 4 could be number 1 on any given season, for sure. I think the reason Burrow is 4 is because he's the only one out of these guys, first of all, that has not won an MVP. But he also is the only one out of these guys that has actually been to a Super Bowl besides Patrick Mahomes. So that's definitely a factor there. And I think he's definitely has the best argument, of his potential to challenge number 1 because he has actually shown the playoff stuff. And then the regular season things, you're just like, okay, I feel like that could come at any given year, But this last year, insanely disappointing. I had them in the AFC title game. Or I think I had them in the AFC title game. Maybe I had them at least winning a playoff game. Everyone did, pretty obvious. But that didn't happen. And I think, for Joe Burrow, I feel like Joe Burrow, again, I'm not saying he can't win an MVP because he absolutely can, and I think he should at some point. But I think it would be really easy for me to give, I don't know, these guys above him, obviously based on the playoff stuff, but also I feel like it just needs to stop with these warm-ups in the beginning of the season. This year it mattered so much more because for the first 3 games of every single year, it feels like it's like, oh wow, that was a crazy upset. The Bengals lost to blah blah blah, or oh, Joe Burrow wasn't as good. I feel like that's always the case. And then when he gets it going, he's insane. But we need to stop having these maybe it's a coaching issue, I don't know. These like first 3 weeks that are like they're just not as good, and then they get it going. You cannot afford that, because that's the reason they're not in the playoffs, Mathis. They lost week 1 to the Patriots. Do you remember that? Like they literally lost week 1 and he was not good, and that's the difference between making the playoffs and missing the playoffs. And so I really think they just need to stop having this slow lead up time with actually getting it going. I think that hurts them a ton, because you don't have a lot of leeway because you're in Cincinnati, unfortunately, for Burrow. Sorry. But that's the situation you're in. But he tied Lamar Jackson as the highest quarterback grade. We know what he is. He's got a bottom 5 offensive line and, obviously great receivers. He can win an MVP. He can make another Super Bowl. It's just, I mean, how well he's succeeded being under pressure in the offensive line makes me want to move him up, because it's been so good. But you can't. You just can't at this moment. And I think on any given year, he could be number 2, maybe 1. But we just got to see it again. We have to see it again, because we don't want to have another Marino-type career, But I do think they're going to be better next year. So that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then we have Allen and Lamar. But we can talk about those two, because those two are flipped. Do you have anything specific on Allen or Burrow?
No, I mean you pretty much said it all. I think Burrow's kind of just the Peyton Brady of this era, just a primarily pocket guy, just wins with his mind, his accuracy, very clutch player as well. I agree starting slow is injury stuff too. I mean, that's been a big reason why I think they started slow is, in most years, he had like a calf injury one year. He had like his appendix removed the one year, so he couldn't practice leading up to the season. So I think that probably helps with it. But I mean, this year, I think he was, he was healthy, ready to go. So we'll see this year how they can start. But I agree having him number 4. And I can just go real quick with Allen, Lamar, and Mahomes, and you can just finish off. I mean, I don't have much to. I think we kind of all see. Everybody has the same 4 pretty much. The difference for me between Allen and Lamar is just the playoff stuff.
Yeah, let me know why. Okay.
Yeah, Allen. I mean, Allen's 2-0 against Lamar in the postseason, and they both have MVPs now. I think Allen, even against the Chiefs, has played a lot better than Lamar has in the postseason. I mean, they had the number 1 seed. They had Kansas City on their home turf, and Lamar completely just was horrible in that game. So I just think Allen being one of the best playoff performers of all time at the quarterback position just gives me the edge over Lamar, because they're both really good in the regular season. I just think also, and then even that you can even tie in injury stuff. Allen hasn't missed, I think, a game in like 4 or 5 seasons now. And Lamar, he's been relatively healthy too the last couple years, but I mean, he's had more, definitely missed more time. So considering all that, I'm just going to give the edge to Lamar or to Allen there, but obviously it's splitting hairs. And then Mahomes, you could definitely say the last few regular seasons, you could argue that he's been number 4 compared to these guys, but you can't take him away with how he rises in the playoffs. He owns all these guys in the postseason. So when the stakes are the highest and it matters the most, Mahomes is the one that finds his way out. So until that changes and one of these guys can consistently battle or take him down, whether that's Lamar or Allen, then maybe we can adjust the list. But for now, I think it's got to be Mahomes. And then just because of their matchups in the postseason, I'll take Allen over Lamar.
Yeah. See, I had Lamar over Allen because I think he should have been MVP. He was my pick. I think we got fatigued because he shouldn't have been. Not that he shouldn't have been, but 2 years ago, like, it was like not a good class for MVP, and he won it. And then this next year, we're like, oh, well, he won it last year in a bad class. We should give it to Allen because he's never won it. When if you looked at all the stats and objective stuff, like, Lamar was better. So that's I had that. And then when they faced in the playoff game, I mean, again, we got to have context. Like, Lamar was better than Burrow in that playoff game, or than Allen in that playoff game.
You think?
Like, Allen had 100 yeah.
Well,
Allen had 127
the big
yards,
thing, though, was
no
the
touchdowns,
turnovers.
and Lamar was
Lamar had
like
the 2 turnovers.
I know, but it was one fumble in, like, I think he was swapping hands or whatever, which, yeah,
he tried to do a
unfortunate.
spin out of the
And then the
pocket
other
fumbled it.
yeah, which, sucks, but it didn't lead to anything. It didn't lead to any
I
sort
thought
of
it was a scoop.
points there
I
at
thought
all.
they scooped it and ran it back inside the 10.
Or no, it was either it was the pick. Sorry, the pick, which apparently the guy ran the wrong route. I actually read up. I remember at the time I read up on it and researched stuff because some guy mentioned it because they asked him about it. He was supposed to run an out and he ran a post, and so it was like that. It was not the route he was supposed to run. I think it was Rashad Bateman or something like that, and it was a pick, and that pick didn't lead to anything, but the fumble did. So the fumble obviously would be the biggest thing, but I just don't want to be like, all right, you had that one fumble, like, all right, you're so much worse, because in the game, like, Lamar just looks so much better than Allen did, and they would have won if Mark Andrews had not dropped that pass. And so that's kind of my thing. Like, he just looked much better, did have the one fumble issue, but also got them to a point where they could have won the game even with all those. Like, he had all those, the two turnovers and all this. One of them I don't blame. The other one, yeah, it was him. It was unfortunate, though. It's not, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was a Will Levis type thing. Maybe it was, but I think even with all that, he still got them to a point where they could beat them at Buffalo, by the way. But I do understand the stuff with him of, versus Mahomes, like, Allen being better. He was obviously good in that playoff game. I don't think he was crazy. I remember watching and just being like, okay, well, that wasn't good. Like, that was not the jitters there or whatever. It was just like you could have won that game, I feel, if it was just a little better stuff there. But he also situationally probably has the worst situation. So I'm fine. I'm not dying on some kind of hill having him above. But all the analytical stuff also thinks Lamar Jackson's the best quarterback in the NFL, at least was last season, especially because his rushing has been better. Less fumbles, more touchdowns, like all that has been pretty good too. One of the best quarterbacks under pressure. I think all that is pretty big. But Allen, gets on any given play, he's the best quarterback and best player in the NFL because of what he can do. He has the most big-time throws and just the best stuff there. So, no problem there. And then, Mahomes, both of us has to be number one. Like, I think if there were to be a year that he wouldn't be, it would be this year. And I'm going to be honest, before the video, I had him ranked third. I did, but then I switched it to one because it was just hard for me to do that because of like, okay, well, they didn't do it. They couldn't do it. They couldn't get over him. They just couldn't do it. I mean, it was one of his worst years, the regular season wise. He was still ranked ninth. And the playoffs honestly made me hesitate too because Houston and Buffalo, like, he was not that good. Like, he wasn't really that special or anything like that. And then the Super Bowl, obviously we know, but I think that was just a big team diff. So he was around the Chiefs were like around the middle of the league, maybe a little lower in all offensive supporting cast stuff, But now we got Rashee Rice back. If he's not a moron again and does stupid stuff, who knows. Brown is actually going to have a full season, worthy year 2. They drafted Jalen Royals, who I really like. They upgraded at tackle, and the O-line in totality I think is going to be much better if Josh Simmons can play at some point. But he's not going to be my MVP pick or anything because it's hard for me to really do that. But last year was the year for one of these guys to get him, and it didn't happen, and they still moved on. So until then, if we have a Mahomes year like last year, and then one of these guys gets ahead of him, I will be putting them ahead of Mahomes. I have no problem with that. But at this point, just can't do it. Just cannot do it. This is supposed to be the year to get him, and they couldn't do it. So maybe next year, but not right now. Mahomes keeps the crown there.
I agree. Nothing left for me to say. 100% agree. I think the situation for Kansas City is pretty underrated actually this year. Worthy, Rashee Rice coming back. You mentioned the upgraded offensive line. I think Mahomes could actually have a really good bounce back here. He's probably going to be reading up a lot of, just everybody hating on him after the Super Bowl loss and how his season
Probably.
was. So I could definitely see Mahomes having a kind of a quote unquote bounce
I could
back
see
kind of year.
top 5 MVP. But I'm not saying I'm just saying I wouldn't bet him because you have to pick one, But could he be top 5 or whatever? 100%. And at that point, it'd be hard to move him down. But
agreed.
Yeah, couldn't get him. So that is our quarterback rankings. Definitely took a while, but there's a lot to say. I'll go through, and obviously we'll see how long the video is. But first of all, thank you so much, Mathis, for staying with me and giving me the time for 3 hours and talking about quarterbacks. Talking ball. It's good, fun. Love doing it. So thank you so much for coming on and helping me out with all this and putting all the effort into it.
I appreciate the yearly appearance. Definitely fun to just go kind of back and forth, bounce off some ideas, some different takes, and I look forward to being back next year for our fourth iteration of this.
Yes, for sure. We'll see how far guys move up and down. Maybe some different stark differences. Who's good there, worse there. I think the more we have them, the better it'd be to see that. So, cheers to hopefully another great year, and we'll be back next year. And then obviously we'll probably see Mathis again when we have the NFL season coming up and doing predictions. I'll do stuff on his channel. We always do draft stuff, so I'll leave his link in the description. Mathis NFL. He also has a gaming channel that's doing really well, doing different college football / NFL rebuilds and stuff. I actually just watched because I thought it was funny, doing a Quinn Ewers rebuild, because that's how much he hates Tua and wants to get out and have a new quarterback be the face of the Miami Dolphins. So that was pretty fun. So I'll leave both those links in the description below. So thank you very much again, Mathis. And as always, stay smart, stay sharp, and I will see you guys later. Peace.